Chapter 184. Strands of strange energy drifted in the light purple desert. Half a month ago, this place was a mountain range with a bustling city. Half a month later, it had turned into a light purple plain. On the plain, cracks that were thousands of feet long spread out like giant centipede. Huge craters stood like a forest of hills. Waves of blazing heat rose from the craters and cracks, causing this place to appear abnormally dry. Half a month ago, the purple star had been annihilated here. At that time, everything here had turned into nothingness in an instant. The ground had also turned into a magma zone. Later on, following the annihilation of the star, not even a speck of dust was left. The magma desert had also gradually solidified, finally turning into a huge crater plain. Desolation covered this place, and it was difficult to see a single person passing by for most of the day. So hot! On the desolate plain, a figure suddenly appeared in the distance. Every step he took caused white smoke to rise from his feet. The blazing heat caused the space to feel slightly distorted. The figure wore a black hat and was dressed in black. His large black windbreaker was almost dragging on the ground. The two blazing suns above his head and the scorching earth beneath his feet caused him to sweat profusely. Casually picking up a light purple stone, the blazing purple fire element caused his palm to reflect a faint purple light. Within this stone, there was still a faint purple night flame remaining. Although it had already been diluted by an unknown number of times, the remaining energy was still surging. To those who possessed fire element, it was an absolute treasure. If one could absorb the fire element into one's body, the fire element in one's body would become much more tyrannical. However, the extremely high temperature here caused this place to be desolate and uninhabited. No one dared to casually step in here. The blazing energy left behind by the annihilation of the star has caused the environment here to become abnormal. I'm afraid that it won't recover even after hundreds of thousands of years. Casually throwing the stone to one side, the figure swung his hand and looked towards a certain place in the sky. Under the black hat, a calm yet somewhat indolent handsome face was revealed. From the looks of it, it was Yun Nuashing. There was a sparkling purple mark between her eyebrows. That appearance was like a rising flame. There is nothing left of Yuyan City. I wonder if there are any traces left there. Letting out a sigh, Yun Nuashing adjusted his hat, then lifted his feet and walked in the direction he was looking at. Half a month had already passed. That day, the purple night dark flame had also reached an agreement with him. He could refine it however he wanted, but he would keep the consciousness of the purple night dark flame. That flickering flame mark was the connection between Yun Nuashing and the purple night dark flame. When the time was right, he would be able to refine it according to his will. His goal had also been achieved in this strange ending. To him, it was also quite good. After being stagnant for 1.5 years, Xingming City is just next to us. We can reach it with just one step. The divine land is not far away. Yun Nuashing looked up at the sky and murmured. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. Everything that had happened in the past 1.5 years flashed before his eyes, making him feel a little indescribable. The journey is about to begin again. He looked at the horizon. There, a small blurry dot had also appeared. The dots of emerald green broke the dull color of this place. Seeing that black dot, Yun Nuashing also chuckled, and his footsteps quickened. As he approached, the dot gradually enlarged. When he walked closer, he realized that it was a green bamboo forest. The vitality flowing in this barren and scorching plain seemed insignificant, but it was so tenacious. The Juyuan mountain villa was actually not burned down. Seeing the bamboo forest, Yun Nuashing was a little surprised. He originally thought that after Yuyan City was destroyed by the expanding star, the Juyuan mountain villa would also cease to exist. However, although he was a little surprised, it wasn't to the extent that he was shocked. He also felt that the Juyuan mountain villa would not be destroyed so easily, so he came here. As soon as he stepped into the bamboo forest, Yun Nuoxing felt the surrounding temperature plummet. The wind that blew against his face was slightly cold, causing him to shiver violently. This bamboo forest was actually isolated from the extreme heat of the lava plain outside. It was as if they were in two extreme environments. All of this made him have goosebumps. The master of the Juyuan mountain villa is probably also a divine spirit expert. After such a long time, he was able to isolate the heat of the purple night flame. This is not something an ordinary person can do. Speaking of which, it was said that no blood was allowed in the Juyuan mountain villa. However, when he roared that day, he heard a response. At that time, he thought that such an expert was probably hiding in the Juyuan mountain villa, silently protecting the villa and observing the people who came to the villa. When he thought of this, he felt like he was being watched like a monkey. Standing at the classical entrance of the villa, Yun Nuoxing raised his head and looked at the 4 words, Juyuan Mountain Villa. He took a deep breath and walked in. The lake in his memories appeared before his eyes as he made 7 or 8 turns. There was not the slightest ripple on the tranquil lake. The few mahogany corridors also appeared before his eyes. Unlike the first time he came here, the Juyuan mountain villa had become desolate following the disappearance of Yuyan City. The surging life force had lost some of its vitality, and it was desolate. Following his memory, he came to the remote mahogany corridor. Yun Nuoxing walked to the innermost part of the corridor. He gently stroked his windbreaker and sat down while reminiscing. This was the place where he and Shuego had met. After sitting for a while, Yun Nuoxing stood up. Looking at the empty lake, he turned around and walked towards the Juyuan mountain lake. After circling around the bamboo forest, the 8 mahogany corridors that were like huge dragons still entered his line of sight with an impact. The Juyuan pavilion was still standing on the top of the small mountain. Yun Nuoxing did not even think and directly walked up. "If you have time in the future, play chess with me." The words of the woman who was glowing all over still echoed in his mind. Yun Nuoxing had also come for her. He was about to leave, and before he left, he wanted to see the people he knew in Yuyan City. Although he didn't know her at all, didn't know her name, and didn't know who she was, his face still twitched when he thought about the 26 games of chess that he had been abused in. Stepping into the mahogany corridor, it was still the same. There were some indecipherable words and runes engraved on the top of the corridor. However, when he walked into the hill again, he didn't feel the same pressure. The many Saint technique arrays that had been engraved all over the mountain path had also disappeared. After walking around the mountain path again and again, he finally came to the top of the hill. After turning a corner, he saw the Juyuan pavilion that he hadn't seen in a long time. The 9 steps that were known as the 9 heavens were also standing under his feet. Looking up at the empty pavilion, Yun Nuoxing slowly turned his head back. However, he didn't see the mountain range that he had seen before. Walking up the 9 steps step by step, Yun Nuoxing turned around again. What he saw was a bamboo forest outside Juyuan mountain villa, as well as the light purple plains in the distance. In the gazebo, the beautiful figure that appeared in his memory was not there. "She's not here," Yun Nuoxing muttered and lowered his head. Although she wasn't there, there was still a chessboard on the table in the pavilion. Black and white chess pieces were placed on the chessboard. This was an unfinished game. He could clearly see that the black chess pieces were at a disadvantage. There were many white chess pieces in the chess boxes on both sides. However, there was only one black chess piece left in the black chess box. His slender fingers picked up the black chess piece. Yun Nuoxing glanced at it and was stunned. There was a word in the black chess piece. It was also glowing with a black light. If one didn't look carefully, it would be difficult to distinguish it. "King." Looking at the word, Yun Nuoxing frowned. He turned his head to look at the unfinished game. The number of black chess pieces was only 1/10 of the number of white chess pieces. Even if he was given a box of black chess pieces, it would be difficult to overturn the game. However, there was only one black chess piece with a word written on it. After thinking for a while, Yun Nuoshing sat down. He held his chin with the hand that was holding the black chess piece, king, and looked around the chessboard. He reached out his hand and wanted to place the black chess piece on it a few times. However, he felt that it was inappropriate and withdrew his hand. How could he overturn the situation with just one chess piece? I can't continue this game. However, what is she trying to tell me? Yun Nuoshing scratched his head in distress and put the black piece back into the box. This black piece with the word king engraved on it must be the most important piece in this game of chess. However, with the power of one piece, how could it reverse this game of chess that was completely defeated? It was like a general who didn't have a single soldier under his command but was faced with thousands of soldiers and horses. No matter how powerful the general was, he wouldn't be able to deal with it. With a sigh, Yun Nuoshing's eyes carefully scanned the stone table inch by inch. He even changed his position to look at it. However, he didn't find anything else. Seeing this, Yun Nuoshing was also a little bored. He circled around the small pavilion and finally found a few words on the innermost pillar. This caused him to feel a little ashamed. This fellow did not even write in a conspicuous place when he wrote Wanlong Mountain. These three simple words made people feel a majestic atmosphere. Seeing these three words, Yun Nuoshing suddenly regained his senses. She seemed to have mentioned these three words when they were playing chess in the Juyuan pavilion that day. Wanlong Mountain, Long Shou Peak. I remember she said that. After muttering to himself, Yun Nuoshing frowned again. He had never heard of this place. He didn't know how big the realm of the gods was. Even with the long lifespan of the gods, it was wishful thinking to completely explore the origin region. There were many places and things that he didn't know about in the realm of the gods. Although he was about to step into the divine prefecture, he had only heard of some places in the Taiyuan region but had never been there. After pondering for a long time, Yun Nuoshing sat back on the stone bench and stared at the chessboard in a daze. Then, he reached out his hand and tried to grab the black and white chess pieces on the chessboard. His fingers moved the two colored chess pieces. However, he was unable to move them even the slightest bit. It was as though they were stuck to the chessboard. The chessboard was also heavily pressed against the stone table, making it difficult to move it even a little. What do you want to say to me? Yun Nuoshing frowned as he took out the black chess piece with the word king written on it. He casually pressed the black chess piece on the chessboard. After waiting for a while, he didn't see any changes on the chessboard. It was as if the game had always been the same and hadn't changed at all. Forget it. With a sigh, Yun Nuoshing grabbed the chess piece and put it into the pendant. Then, he turned around and walked out of the gazebo. He looked back at the quiet gazebo and cupped his hand. With a flick of his cloak, he flew into the sky like lightning. He felt that they would meet again in the so-called Wanlong Mountain. After he left, the gazebo and Juyuan mountain villa became silent again. The rustling of bamboo leaves in the wind quietly echoed here. Chapter 185. At the peak of the mountain, in a brand new manor, laughter could be heard. This 9-shrine manor, which was on the verge of collapse, had been urgently rescued by Jin Jinwang and the others. Although it looked a little different, the general traces of its original state could still be found. Tens of thousands of miles away from the light purple plains, this mountain peak stood quietly. Jin Jinwang and the others had set up an energy restriction on this mountain peak. After the battle ended, they miraculously saw that the mountain peak had not melted, so they moved it here. Under the big tree beside the manor, there was also a tombstone quietly standing there. It was a nameless tomb, where peace and harmony lingered. Whoosh! Suddenly, there was a burst of wind in the sky, and a fiery red figure quickly approached from afar. Specks of light particles dissipated in the air, but in a flash it appeared on the peak of the mountain and walked into the manor. In the courtyard, Uxin was surprised to see that Yao Hua and the others were actually quarreling with Shui Guo and the others. When they first met, they did not seem to get along, and she was worried that the two would fight. She did not expect to see such a harmonious scene when she returned from a trip outside. "You're back. No more nostalgia?" The first to see Uxin was still Jin Jinwang, who was sitting in the courtyard drinking tea and chatting wittily. After such an earth-shattering battle, everyone needed to rest for a while, so they seemed a little lazy. Even the 9 heroes were a little lazy, but this was not a big deal. Everyone needed to rest, right? Well, I definitely have some nostalgia. Those places are a little far, and I can't go there. I'll come back and take a look when I have time in the future. Uxin smiled. Once she went to the Divine Prefecture, she did not know how long it would be before she could return to the Taiyuan territory. She wanted to leave the Taiyuan territory without any nostalgia, but in the end, she could only make a trip to the Juyuan Mountain Villa. Crimson Star City and Xingling City were too far away. It's not like you can't come back. Don't always act like you have seen through the vicissitudes of life, Sister 5 Element. She swung her legs and grinned. Uxin smiled and patted her head, but did not say anything. You're back and your affinity is full. If there's nothing else, I'll refine it now. Just as Uxin returned, a purple-clothed girl walked out of the hall. Looking at her appearance, it was Ziyi Yuyen. However, Uxin had forcefully given her the name, Ziyi. Seeing Uxin, she lazily stretched and said to the former without any room for discussion. Her delicate hand carried her and she walked to the secret room to the side, leaving behind a wailing sound that lingered on the spot. "Ah, can you let me rest for a while?" Uxin, who had her arm grabbed, only had time to shout out before she was dragged into the secret room. With a bang, everything quieted down. The group of people looked at each other. "You look at me, I look at you," all of them silently laughed. These two guys were really impatient. Big Sister is happy and in pain. Ming giggled as she watched the two of them enter the secret chamber. "Big Sister, I'm so happy." Little Purple Soul covered her mouth with her little hand and said happily. "Little Xin, you're really lucky." Yuyin also smiled and shook her head. She brought the two girls to sit beside Yi Shi and chatted with her about some trivial things. This time, Yun Nuoxing might have to wait for a while to refine the divine flame. In the dark secret room, a purple light quietly appeared. There was only a stone bed and a soft cushion in the secret room. It seemed a little simple. In the secret room, Yun Nuoxing sat cross-legged on the stone bed with her eyes closed. The surrounding energy mist was dense. In the mist, there were some faint purple flames rising. Waves of energy were refined by the purple flames and condensed into a water column. It drilled into the top of Yun Nuoxing's head. After being refined by the soul-burning technique, it turned into pure Yuan Li and spread throughout the energy crystals in her meridians. The slightly dim crystals regained some of their dazzling radiance. The 5-colored energy flowed within the crystals, shuttling through her limbs and bones. Beside Yun Nuoxing, Ziyi raised her head and looked at the invisible sky. Her eyes were a little dazed. Her slender hand played with a strand of hair out of boredom. Her body was surrounded by purple flames, helping Yun Nuoxing refine the mottled energy of heaven and earth. Ever since she had established a connection with him, the rejection in her heart had gradually weakened. That day, she had accepted Yun Nuoxing's suggestion without much thought. They would go on a journey hand in hand. Once they found the person she was looking for, they would decide what to do. Perhaps this was the best ending for them. Keeping my consciousness. I don't know if this guy is really stupid or what. Ziyi turned her head to look at Yun Nuoxing, who was cultivating, and sighed. If someone else had subdued her, the first thing they would have done would have been to destroy her consciousness. This wouldn't affect the spirituality of the Purple Night Dark Flame. It would only return it to its original state, so that it wouldn't suffer a backlash when refining it. Fine. I'll just follow this kid and see. I have nothing to do anyway. Ziyi let out a light breath. She couldn't help but shake her head with a faint smile. This was the first time she had seen such an interesting guy. Perhaps his journey would be surprisingly interesting. Phew! After a long while, Yun Nuoshing exhaled, and the surrounding dense energy of heaven and earth also slowly dissipated. The fog dispersed, revealing a handsome face, and his eyes shone with a little bit of light. Now, he had also adjusted his breathing to the best state, and his origin energy was rolling non-stop, and there was actually a bit of a surging feeling. Done. Seeing him open his eyes, Ziyi turned her head and smiled faintly. Yeah. Yun Nuoshing nodded. He was just resting for a while to recover the consumption of light essence. It wouldn't take long. Take it off. Seeing him nod, Ziyi also nodded. She sat upright and still in front of him, and said concisely, "Okay, a what? What did you just say?" Yun Nuoshing nodded reflexively. However, after he reacted, he realized that something was wrong. Taking it off meant, I said, take off your clothes. Ziyi helplessly held her forehead. Could it be that she didn't make it clear enough? About that, miss. No matter what, I'm still. Yun Nuoshing laughed dryly. He scratched his head a little awkwardly. A man and a woman alone in a room. No matter how you put it, it didn't sound good. But now, why are you being shy with a flame? Ziyi's face darkened. She couldn't help but roll her eyes. But, you have the appearance of a human now. You don't look like a flame at all. Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly. A flame that transformed into a human was still a human. Moreover, this was a divine body that the god had forged for her. She was already a human in the truest sense of the word. Since that's the case, I'll help you. Ziyi sighed. Taking advantage of the fact that Yun Nuoshing wasn't paying attention, her jade-like hands danced, and she stripped him naked in one go. An excessively fair naked body bloomed, just like that. Yun Nuoshing's vision blurred. His expression froze. Just as he was about to say something, he felt that his body was a little cold. He lowered his head and saw that his upper body was naked. A crimson blush quickly surged onto his handsome face. After a long time, he squeezed out a shocking sentence, "Molestation." Ziyi was so shocked by his words that she spat out a mouthful of water. She covered her face with her jade-like hands. Her delicate body trembled uncontrollably. A vein actually bulged on her jade-like hands. "If you call me that again, this old lady will really molest you." Ziyi fiercely gritted her teeth a few times. She pretended to be fierce as she roared at him. She had seen deranged people before, but she had never seen someone this deranged. "I was wrong." Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing shuddered. His two index fingers gently poked each other as if he had been wronged. His bashful appearance made people lose their temper. Humph! Seeing that he had become obedient, Ziyi lightly snorted. Her jade-like hands formed a series of hand seals. A vast amount of energy fluctuated along with the hand seals, gathering towards those two small hands. The energy fluctuated, causing the surrounding space to tremble violently. It was as if it would shatter with just a little more force. After forming the hand seals for a while, Ziyi slightly opened her eyes. With a thought, all the energy gathered was transferred to a slender finger. Her index finger was filled with a rich purple light. Then, she gently tapped Yun Nuoshing's chest. Boundless purple energy continuously surged into the latter's body like a river. Slowly, a purple flame pattern was drawn on his chest. It was vivid and lifelike, and it was as colorful as a real flower. Half an hour later, the pattern was completely drawn. Ziyi's finger flicked on Yun Nuoshing's chest, causing the pattern to disappear under his skin. Taking a deep breath, Ziyi slowly closed her eyes. Her hand seals changed, and with a thought, her entire body emitted a dazzling purple light. Purple flames continuously rose. Ziyi's actions naturally attracted Yun Nuoshing's attention. He immediately opened his eyes and saw Ziyi turn into a purple flame. Then, the purple flame that was the size of a head and slightly swaying landed on Yun Nuoxing's hand. A clear voice that sounded like a wind chime rang out from it. "Remember, don't refine my consciousness. Otherwise, I won't be able to show myself." After hearing Ziye's warning, Yun Nuoxing nodded solemnly. They had agreed to go on this journey together, and he did not want anything to happen to Ziyi. He immediately took a deep breath and focused his mind. He held the ball of purple night flame that did not emit any heat. He gulped, gritted his teeth, steeled his heart, and pressed it into his lower abdomen. The moment the flame entered his body, the flame between his eyebrows suddenly blossomed with light, and the purple flame pattern on his chest suddenly lit up. The pattern at the corner actually followed the flow of the elemental energy and seemed to come alive. It actually grew and spread throughout his entire body. Yun Nuoxing's mind was completely focused on his body. His gaze was solemn as he looked at the slowly rising purple flame. Then he was stunned. Ziyi was also stunned for a moment when he did not sense Yun Nuoxing's movements for a long time. He then sent a message to Ziye's body. "What's wrong?" What should I do?" Yun Nuoxing was a little embarrassed. He had already stuffed the divine flame into his body, yet he still asked what he should do. If those who were longing for the purple night dark flame heard this, they would definitely be angered to the point that one Buddha would ascend to the heavens. "Put down the purple night dark flame and let me do it. I'm also drunk." After hearing this, Ziyi trembled in Yun Nuoxing's lower abdomen. Even the patterns stopped sweating. Ziyi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He weakly muttered, "The pattern just now was a kind of engraving. The half-moon soul imprint made the affinity between us full. There's no need to touch it anymore. Just circulate your profound technique and refine it. Be careful, don't refine my consciousness." After hearing Ziye's reminder again, Yun Nuoxing nodded vigorously like a chick pecking at rice. She carefully circulated the soul-burning art with her mind. Strands of elemental energy mobilized the fire element in her body and circled around the swaying flame twice. "Phew!" Yun Nuoxing exhaled. With a thought, her elemental energy wrapped around the purple night flame and circulated it along with the soul-burning art. Because she had to be careful not to refine Ziye's consciousness, she didn't mobilize any soul force this time. She was completely controlled by her elemental energy and fire element. However, even though Ziyi controlled it and didn't release any energy, it was still the ruler of all flames. The blue flame in Yun Nuoxing's body was still suppressed to the point that it couldn't come out. Therefore, she only circulated the pure fire element. When the soul-burning art started circulating with the purple night flame, the purple pattern that stopped just now continued to grow. It gradually spread to every corner of Yun Nuoxing's body. The purple light flickered and covered Yun Nuoxing's upper body. It looked very mysterious. After the refinement was on the right path, Ziyi also mobilized his majestic energy and circulated it through Yun Nuoxing's meridians. Along the way, it washed every part of his body and shot out energy imprints. The divine imprint that Yun Nuoxing originally had in her body didn't stop the imprints that belonged to the purple night flame. Instead, it fused with them. The majestic energy whizzed through Yun Nuoxing's body, creating a series of crisp sounds. It even created a small hurricane outside of her body. The sound of the wind whistling in the secret room didn't stop. Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and carefully formed a hand seal. As the hand seal changed, a wisp of the purple night flame that was flowing through her meridians was instantly refined. The majestic energy instantly surged out and rushed to every corner of her body. Every inch of her bones, muscles, and cells were fighting for this energy like a hungry wolf. However, after a while, Yun Nuoxing felt that something was wrong. With her body strengthened by the 5 elements, the soul-burning art that could devour all things, and her meridians that had condensed into crystals, logically speaking, she should be a bottomless pit. Any energy that entered her body would be refined in an instant and fused into her body, but now Yun Nuoxing's body was actually reaching the point of saturation. That kind of extreme refining speed couldn't keep up with the speed at which the purple night flame released energy. That enormous amount of energy made Yun Nuoxing's scalp tingle. Wasn't this too much? Since Purple Night didn't say anything, it meant that the situation was still fine. Yun Nuoxing didn't have too many worries. She mustered up all her strength and circulated the soul-burning art with all her might. She converted all her soul energy into surging energy and rapidly refined it in her body. The light purple imprints in her body also increased in number. They were assimilated by the original silver-white imprints and engraved into every part of her body. Although he had pushed the refining speed to the limit, Yun Nuoxing still felt a little powerless. As the volume of the purple night dark flame gradually decreased, the energy released actually increased by several times. The extra energy that he didn't have time to refine actually filled every inch of his body, and it continued to increase. And that light purple energy changed the color of the crystals. If he continued to release energy, the meridians of these crystals would shatter sooner or later, and then his body would explode and he would die. Explode? Thinking of this result, Yun Nuoxing shuddered violently. Wasn't this a joke? However, she had no other choice now. She could only use all her strength and desperately refine it. This was the first time she felt that too much energy wasn't a good thing. Buzz! Just as the purple night flame was completely refined and released an almost limitless amount of energy, a new connection was born in Yun Nuoxing's mind. Then, a soft sound suddenly came from her body. The energy that filled her body and was enough to kill a heavenly god seemed to be attracted by something. All of it retreated like a tide and condensed on Yun Nuoxing's lower abdomen, forming a purplish-black energy crystal. A few small energy matrices surrounded this crystal and slowly covered the terrifying energy. Feeling that the swelling feeling in her body was suddenly swept away, Yun Nuoxing instantly heaved a long sigh of relief. She laughed bitterly. Too much energy isn't a very good thing. Chapter 186. You're messing around again. As soon as the crystal formed, a clear and pleasant voice of reproach sounded in Yun Nuoxing's mind. Surprisingly, it was Ziye's voice, but it contained a faint trace of anger and reproach. I don't know what to do. Yun Nuoxing laughed bitterly and muttered softly. Are you blaming me? Ziyi was a little unhappy when he heard that. It's not your fault. It's my fault. Yun Nuoxing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't have any experience in refining divine flames, and he didn't expect such a huge amount of energy to suddenly appear. That amount of energy was enough to stuff a god to death, and it almost exploded in his body. Yun Nuoxing's eyes flickered, and he suddenly said, Ziyi, you're ranked 90th. How can you have such a huge amount of energy? You're at the peak of the Emperor God level. I'm afraid even the divine flames at the top don't have that much energy. Tisk, a divine body made from the divine spark of a god is a rebirth for me. Since you said that I'm a human, that means that I can cultivate. How can I still be ranked 90th? After being sealed for more than 60 years, although I'm in a state of deep sleep, it's not to the extent that I haven't improved at all. To be honest, it's already considered very slow to reach the peak of the Emperor God level after 60 years. Furthermore, I'm not afraid of the divine flames ranked 20th or 30th. Ziyi was a little disdainful when he heard Yun Nuoxing's words. Alright, you're the best, alright? Yun Nuoxing didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard that. Of course. Yun Nuoxing, sitting down and adjusting his breathing for a while, he released his elemental energy, illuminating the pitch-black secret room. Scratching his head, a few strands of his long hair floated in front of him, being glanced at by Yun Nuoxing. He discovered that the originally glossy black long hair had actually turned into light purple long hair. A pair of bright and spirited pitch-black eyes were also dyed with some light purple, and there was also a trace of bright gold. Yun Nuoshing jumped up when he saw this extremely beautiful and elegant change. What the hell was this? Could it be that refining divine flames also had the ability to dye one's hair? Your Violet Knight, who was hiding in Yun Nuoshing's body, also sensed this change. Since their minds were connected, she could sense every inch of Yun Nuoshing's body. However, she also let out a puzzled cry. It seemed that she had also discovered something special. What happened? Yun Nuoshing was also a little surprised when she heard Ziye's puzzled voice. She thought that something had happened to her body, so she quickly asked. There are several high-grade divine artifacts in your body. The 5 elements do not repel each other. The energy carrier is a crystal. The energy can contain all things and transform into the might of heaven and earth. You can ascend and become an immortal. This is a spirit body? Ziyi murmured. Her voice was a little uncertain. These strange traits were rarely seen in the outside world, yet they had all been stuffed into one person's body. Even she was a little surprised. Spirit body Rong? Yun Nuoshing was a little confused when she heard Ziye's words. Clearly, she had never heard of it before. Is it a type of physique? Mine? I thought I only had a mortal body. It's a very, very rare physique, but it doesn't seem like it. Ziyi also responded when she heard that. However, she sighed with some confusion. The spirit body Rong only contains all living things in one's body. There shouldn't be such a change. Your physique can take the things in your body and turn them into a part of you. You can use them to strengthen yourself. Just as she finished speaking, Ziyi seemed to have a sudden realization. She was a little confused. After a while, she said uncertainly, could it be the spirit body Rong? When he said these words, Violet Knight couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air, and his voice actually trembled a little. So what is it? Yun Nuoshing was confused when she heard these unfamiliar words. She did not know what she was talking about. The spirit body Rong is an extremely rare physique. Can contain all things in the world and use them for oneself. Moreover, no matter what it contains or absorbs, there will not be any backlash. It can be as big as a boundless galaxy or as small as a strand of energy. It can be refined into one's body. The vastness of the God realm was immeasurably vast, and it wasn't surprising that anything could be born there. There was a group of people who, due to mutations, were born with special characteristics that were different from ordinary people. They had all sorts of strange constitutions, and those who possessed them could go further on the path of cultivation than ordinary people. However, not everyone had these constitutions, and the chances of them being born were minuscule. If it weren't for the fact that there were so many people in the God realm, it was likely that such people wouldn't even exist. Since ancient times, there were only a handful of recorded spiritual godly physiques. They were the kind of physiques that belonged to the legendary level. Every spiritual godly physique was an expert that shocked the ancient and dazzled the contemporaries. Of course, there were exceptions to everything. It did not mean that people with special physiques were necessarily stronger than those with mortal bodies. Among the gods since ancient times, many had mortal bodies. Therefore, these were not everything. It still depended on how far one could go. Even if an ordinary person was compatible with a divine weapon and was recognized as its master, there would only be one divine weapon at most. If they wanted to be compatible with a second divine weapon, they would definitely suffer a backlash. There is an extremely strong resistance between the divine weapons recognition ceremony. It would not allow a second divine weapon to coexist with one. However, you have several divine weapons on you. Moreover, you have completely dissolved my origin flame into your body. Do you know that you usually need to find another way to store something as powerful as the origin flame? I don't know. Yun Nuoshing shook her head straightforwardly. Since she came to Yuyan City, she had encountered a lot of things. Most of the time, she was fooling around. She did not do anything beforehand and did not understand anything. Naturally, she did not know how to store the origin flame. After all, when she obtained the blue origin flame, she directly merged it into her body. Zai was speechless. If she had not met such a kind-hearted origin flame, Yun Nuoxing would have been burned to ashes long ago. Now I understand. When I saw you directly throw the origin flame into your body and ignore it, I thought you wanted to die. However, if you were a spirit body Rong, it would make sense. Your body is the best storage device. You don't need anything else to store the origin flame. Moreover, don't you think that you are a little too strong for someone who is only close to the half-immortal realm? Let's not talk about the divine artifact. Just look at your own strength and dharma arrays. The spirit body Rong has an affinity with the power of heaven and earth. You don't have to worry about not being able to learn profound techniques, especially dharma arrays. Simply put, when you come into contact with new energy, it will not be as troublesome as it is for ordinary people. It will be very easy for you to control it. Then let me put it simply. Yun Nuoxing tilted her head and said, My body can stuff anything into it, right? Yes, and everything that you put into your body will strengthen your body at all times. When the spirit body Rong reaches the great accomplishment stage, you can refine a star field, or decompose it into origin energy, or absorb it into your body. You can imagine that scene yourself, Zai replied. However, your physique is only operating unconsciously now. You have not come into contact with the origin energy of the spirit body Rong. In other words, your physique has not truly awakened yet, Zai said again. Then when will it awaken? Yun Nuoxing opened her mouth and quickly asked. This. Zai paused for a moment, but did not answer immediately. After thinking for a long time, he said, That? I guess when you cultivate to the immortal realm, you will be able to control the spirit body Rong as you wish. I guess, then what about my hair? Yun Nuoxing rolled her eyes. That's because it contains my origin energy. Doesn't it look good? Isn't purple your favorite color? Zai laughed softly in Yun Nuoxing's mind. I like it. No. Yun Nuoxing nodded. Then, she suddenly felt that something was wrong. A look of horror appeared on her face, and she suddenly exclaimed, How did you know? Pfft. Zai suddenly seemed to have heard something funny, and she laughed very happily. If she transformed into her original form, she would probably be rolling on the ground now. Yun Nuoxing was confused by her laughter. After a long time, she said, You refine me into your body, and our minds are connected. I know everything about you, including your interests and quirks. In short, I know everything about you. You're not allowed to pry into my privacy. Yun Nuoxing's face suddenly flushed red. If everything was seen clearly, then he would be too ashamed to face anyone. It's too late. I've seen everything. Should I call you Little Star or Little Shinshin? Or maybe I have special requirements. You have a sister complex, so it's not impossible to call you Big Brother. Or do you want me to call you Master? Zai smiled even more brightly when she heard this, and she even used an extremely charming voice to tease him. Ah! Late at night, a certain mountain peak was suddenly violently shaken by a sound wave. Jin Wang and the others who were drinking tea outside spat out a mouthful of tea in shock. They all looked at the trembling secret room in astonishment and looked at each other in dismay. Then I'll call you Little Star, Zai said after thinking for a while. After thinking for a while, Ziyi made up his mind. Then, he smiled and said, Right now, all of my power is sealed in your body. The amount is too large, and you can't absorb it all yet. I will seal it, and the energy will seep out from the seal and accelerate your cultivation. When you finish refining it, you will probably advance to the God Emperor level. God Emperor. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly when he heard this. That legendary level was still too far away from him. He was only a small mortal stage cultivator. With the help of the purple night flame, He had only advanced 2 levels and reached the 11th level of the mortal stage. He was still a short distance away from the half-immortal stage. Alright, why are you so depressed? The spiritual divine body is known as the strongest and fastest physique in the world. With Big Sister here, I guarantee that your cultivation path will be smooth sailing. Zai smiled when he sensed Yun Nuoxing's mood. Then I'll leave it to you. Yun Nuoxing could only nod in agreement when he heard Zai say, I'll take care of everything. After all, she was already living in his body. What else could he do? With a smile, Yun Nuoxing raised his arm with his palm facing up. He clenched his fist slightly, and a bewitching purple flame with a terrifying temperature appeared above his palm. It moved according to his will, and flew around his fingertips like a fairy. The purple flame illuminated his face. He also raised his left hand. With a thought, a blue flame also rose on his palm. Beside the purple night dark flame, it was a little unstable. Although the purple night dark flame was refined by Yun Nuoxing, it was still the king of all flames. Ordinary flames would have a lot of suppression when facing it. Being able to summon it now was already considered good. A thought flashed through his mind, and Yun Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. Origin energy gushed out from his body and enveloped the 2 flames. Then, he held the 2 flames in his hand and slowly approached them. Suddenly, the 2 flames became a little restless. The flames wavered, and faintly resisted Yun Nuoxing's actions. He frowned. A large amount of origin energy gushed out and poured into the 2 flames continuously. He felt that the resistance had weakened a lot, so he continued to move his palm and let the 2 flames stick together. The 2 flames also went berserk for a moment, but they also calmed down in an instant. As everyone knew, there was resistance between different flames, just like there was resistance between different elements. They were incompatible and couldn't be touched together. Otherwise, it would cause a riot, and it might even cause the flames to explode. Therefore, a person could only have one type of flame in their body. However, the combination of 2 types of flames was very powerful. In ancient times, many geniuses had tried to combine 2 types of flames. The energy that was produced was extremely terrifying, but it was also very difficult to control. There were even people who tried to imitate it, but they died from the backlash of the flames. This kind of thing wasn't uncommon. However, perhaps because Yun Nuoxing's body was special, the 2 types of flames didn't resist too much when they reached his hand. However, Yun Nuoxing didn't continue the next step. He just let the 2 types of flames stick together. A moment later, the blue flames casually dissipated. He blinked his eyes, and with a thought, he waved his hand. The ball of purple flames left his hand and stopped in front of him. Then, it squirmed and slowly outlined a graceful and exquisite figure. A moment later, a young girl in her budding years appeared from the flames. Her deep and beautiful eyes looked at Yun Nuoxing. She tilted her head and asked in confusion, "What's wrong with calling me out?" "Nothing, I just wanted to try and see if I could call you out." Yun Nuoxing smiled and reached out to scratch Ziye's sharp nose. "Oh." Ziyi wrinkled her little nose and blinked. "It's nothing. As long as nothing happens to you, nothing will happen to me. I can manifest at any time. Just call out if anything happens." After saying that, she smiled briefly and plunged into Yun Nuoxing's arms. She turned into a ball of fire and rushed into his body. Seeing Ziyi shrink back in less than a minute after coming out, Yun Nuoxing shook his head helplessly. Since he was sure that everything was fine, it was time to go out. Yu Yin, Shao Shi, and the others must be waiting anxiously. If he went out a little later, he would be ravaged again. Where's the heavenly tribulation? Just as he walked to the entrance of the cave, Yun Nuoxing suddenly felt that something was wrong. It seemed that he didn't experience any heavenly tribulation this time after jumping 2 levels. Well, forget it. Let's not care about him. In any case, Ziyi is constantly tempering her body. Let's just ignore the 1 or 2 heavenly tribulations. Chapter 187. The two stars hung high in the sky, shining down bright rays of light onto Yun Nuoshing, who had just come out of the secret room. A gentle breeze blew, causing his beautiful purple hair to sway in the wind. His black windbreaker also gently swayed. After a while, his tightly shut eyes slowly adjusted to the sunlight and he gently opened them. On his handsome face blue and red light flowed. What appeared once again was that peerlessly beautiful face that could topple cities. I should find a time to explain clearly. Touching his face, Yu Xian couldn't help but sigh. Pretending to be a girl in front of Jin Jinwang and the others was really too tiring. However, if she explained, she would be seen as a pervert. Now that she thought about it, Yun Nuoshing sighed heavily. Now that she thought about it, if she hadn't gone crazy and refused to turn her head that day, he wouldn't have to be so sullen. He wouldn't have to change his appearance from time to time. Sooner or later, his mind would become twisted. Damned arrogant fart man, is that what you want to say? While Yu Xian was sighing, Purple Knight's laughter suddenly echoed in her heart. Hearing this, her bitter smile became even more pronounced. It was as if Yao Hua hadn't talked to her that day, this wouldn't have happened. Thinking about it this way, she seemed to relax a little. Forget it, one day I will explain clearly. When is someday? Yu Xian was startled. She then shook her head with a bitter smile and said, let's talk about it later. The scene of being seen as a pervert was too beautiful. It was so beautiful that she couldn't bear to look at it directly. Little star, oh little star. Hearing this, Purple Knight laughed and imitated Yu Yin's tone. Yu Xian rolled her eyes, and the 6 wings on her back slowly unfurled. Now that she had refined the Purple Knight flame, not only had her hair turned light purple, even her 6 large wings that were like screens had been dyed with a faint purple color. Black and purple intertwined, making her look extremely dazzling and gorgeous. Black is my color. Yu Xian muttered to herself. Why wasn't it dyed blue back then? She glanced at 6-winged, which was a mix of purple and black. Thinking back to when she had refined the blue fire, her body had not changed at all. She could not help but feel a little puzzled. If her body had changed at that time, Xian Yin would have been able to tell. Then, she would have been able to help her understand this so-called spiritual godly body. That's because the blue flame was too weak. The energy wasn't enough to change the godly body. Hearing Yun Nuoshing's question, Ziye's voice sounded in her mind. He explained, not all kinds of energy can cause visible changes to the divine body. The energy that can change this kind of constitution is either very special or very powerful. Oh! Yu Xian gently nodded. His 6 wings spread out and they were 10 feet long. Countless wind elements gathered on his 6 wings, supporting his body slightly. With a thought, the 6 wings slowly retracted back into his body. The whistling wind also gradually calmed down. A blazing aura with a sense of majesty spread out, causing the temperature of the space to rise sharply. 11 extremes, 10 revolutions, 2 more revolutions, and I can reach the half-immortal realm. Clenching her fists and feeling the power in her body, Yu Xian couldn't help but smile. Only by stepping into the immortal realm could one's cultivation truly begin. The faster one passed the mortal realm, the better one's aptitude would be, and the more time one would have to rush to a higher realm. And now, she seemed to be about to step into the immortal realm. If you want to break through the mortal realm, you can do it now. You can even directly cross the half-immortal realm and directly rush into the immortal realm. Ziyi suddenly said indifferently. How? Hearing this, Yu Xian couldn't help but be startled. You have so many profound crystals in your body. They're just decorations. Why don't you use them? Ziyi said indifferently. But, however, this method is only suitable for you. In other words, it can only be used by the spiritual godly body. Also, it can only be used to cross the half-immortal, half-demon, and half-god. Before Yu Xian could finish the word, but, Ziyi continued, the energy provided by the mysterious crystal is very pure. The higher the level of the mysterious crystal, the closer the energy is to pure energy. It can be absorbed into the body without any refining. However, refining a large amount of mysterious crystal at once will definitely make the strength stagnate. You know this, right? Hearing this, Uxian nodded. What she knew seemed to be the case. Normally, when she used profound crystals, it would be converted into pure energy through a magic formation. Then, it would be absorbed into the body along with the energy of heaven and earth. It was a little different from refining it directly. Moreover, she didn't use it often. The cultivation method of the spiritual godly body is as long as there's energy. Devouring and absorbing energy is your cultivation path. But that will make my energy mottled, won't it? Uxian frowned. Moreover, she wasn't even sure if she had the spiritual godly body or not. Although Ziyi had lived for more than 60 years, if she said she did, then it wouldn't be wrong. You have the spiritual godly body. You can refine anything for your own use. You don't have to worry about the mottled energy. Ziyi sighed and said, moreover, it's not that the spiritual godly body won't stagnate. There will be other ways to show it. That's why I said that it's only suitable for the half-step transition. Normally, I suggest you cultivate it yourself. Moreover, don't you feel that the energy in your body has changed? Ziyi said again. Yes, it's much hotter than before. Moreover, it doesn't feel right. It's not the same feeling as before. Uxian said hesitantly. After subduing the purple night dark flame, she gradually felt that the fluctuation of the purple night dark flame had changed. It didn't feel like the energy she used before. That's it. This is one of the characteristics of the spiritual godly body. You can slowly feel it in the future. It's useless to say too much now. Ha! Uxian tilted her head. She didn't understand. In the hall. Yi Shi, who was laughing and chatting with Yuan, suddenly turned her gaze. The smile in her eyes was replaced by sharpness, causing everyone to be stunned. They angrily shouted towards the outside of the hall, "Who is it?" The sudden shout scared Yuan. When she came back to her senses, she quickly pulled Little Purple Soul and Ming behind her. Mei Mao stared nervously at the place where the bright sunlight shone in. Shui Gu and Yao Hua's group, who were chasing and fooling around, hurriedly came to a halt. The energy within the bodies of the Gold God King's group quietly circulated. A stern aura began to swirl within the hall like a tornado. "It's me. Why are you so loud? You scared me to death." Just as everyone was prepared for battle, a weak voice suddenly rang out from outside the door, causing Yi Shi and the rest to be stunned. Wasn't that Uxian's voice? Just as the voice rang out, they saw a red robe appear behind the dazzling golden screen. That appearance of shrinking her head caused everyone to look at each other. Sister Five Elements? But this energy aura, it's not yours? Yi Shi was also stunned. Her bright eyes were filled with astonishment. From what she could sense, it was clearly another person's energy. Hearing this, Uxian staggered and almost knelt down. Her face could not help but twitch. This was really novel. The so-called divine body of receiving spirit was just for playing tricks? Seeing the person who had come, Yuan heaved a sigh of relief and slowly stretched her waist. Her delicate body that was wrapped in a red robe revealed an alluring curve. Her slender hand combed her soft black hair. Looking at Little Purple Soul and Ming Ming who were beside her rushing out, her red lips slightly lifted into a helpless smile. "Sister!" Seeing the two little people jumping over, Uxian couldn't help but smile. She quickly reached out and caught the two of them. After cuddling for a while, she walked into the hall. "Are you done?" Pulling Yuan to sit beside her, Yuan looked at her long hair that had changed color. Mei Mao blinked and smiled. "Yes." Yun Nuoshing nodded. "All right. Now I have to call you Sister Divine Flame." Yi Shi couldn't help but roll her eyes. "Little girl, when you stop calling my name, then you can call me that." Uxian also rolled her eyes at her. It was as if the two of them didn't get along. Jinwang and the others were stunned. Purple Night, Dark Flame. You're done refining it? The Fire God King, who was sitting at the side, couldn't help but stand up when he saw Uxian come out. His face was filled with curiosity as he moved closer. His eyes were also filled with a trace of passion. Something like a divine flame, and this Purple Night Dark Flame even contained divine deity, made him extremely envious. Uxian smiled. She waved her hand and a purple flame slowly rose from her hand. At the same time, the temperature in the hall also rose rapidly. That hot feeling caused Yao Hua, who was just about to approach, to involuntarily withdraw. You've really refined it. When the Purple Night Dark Flame appeared, Jinwang couldn't help but take a few more glances. Looking at the rising purple flame in Uxian's hand, his voice was filled with envy. The divine flame was something that many people dreamed of. It fell into Yun Nuoshing's hands so easily. Hee, the Fire God Palace wouldn't want me to spit it out, right? Hearing Jinwang's voice, Uxian was startled for a moment. She suppressed the temperature of the Purple Night Dark Flame, then laughed and teased. She knew that the Fire God Palace was here for the Purple Night Dark Flame. The Purple Night Dark Flame was subdued by you. It has nothing to do with us. Hearing that, the Fire God King waved his hand and laughed. If they didn't have it, they could just find another one. Speaking of which, it was just a long-cherished wish of his. It didn't matter if they didn't have it. Didn't the Lightning Divine Palace still manage to survive without the Devil Lightning? Divine Flame. I want it too. Huoji gently stood up and walked in front of Uxian. She moved her face closer and looked at the demonic purple flame at a close distance. Her words were filled with undisguised envy. Hee. Uxian smiled. If she didn't reach an agreement with Purple Night, she wouldn't have been able to subdue the Purple Night Dark Flame that was strengthened by the divine deity. Speaking of which, although she had finally weakened Purple Night, without her help, she probably wouldn't have been able to refine it. The Purple Night Dark Flame with the strength of a peak god lord was not something she could control by herself. What are your plans next? Jinwang retracted his gaze from the Purple Night Dark Flame and looked at Uxian, saying, "The matter of the Purple Night Dark Flame has come to an end. If there's nothing else, we'll return to the Divine Palace." Me. Speaking of her purpose, Uxian pondered for a moment. Previously, she went to the Divine Weapon City to look for the Divine Soul Fruit. In the end, she went to the Red Star Academy. Now she was here. The route that the heaven-defying ultimate god gave her seemed to start from the Divine Continent and end there. Then, she might as well go straight to the Divine Continent. The Divine Continent, it's time to take a walk there. After thinking it through, Yusin spoke without hesitation. There was a hint of excitement in her voice. She was looking forward to that great world. Now that she had finally taken a step into it, this was only the beginning of her journey. There were still many things she needed to do in the future. Do you want us to send you there? Jinwang wasn't surprised by this answer and nodded slightly. After all, Uxian had mentioned that she wanted to go to the Divine Continent. It just so happened that they were going back to the Divine Palace, so it was on the way. Well, there's no need. The Star Underworld City is just next to us. If you have something to do, you don't have to wait for us. Hearing this, Uxian shook her head. She also knew that the Temple of Elements was in the Divine Continent, but she didn't know the specific location. She planned to go to the Divine Continent by herself. Moreover, the most important thing was that staying with Jinwang meant that she would always be a girl. It was simply a nightmare. It was better to leave as soon as possible. Well, anyway, the Star Underworld City is not far from here. After crossing a distance, there won't be much left. This trip may have been for many years. These children should go back and rest. No, it's time to train. Jinwang nodded. He was just about to say that they should rest, but he suddenly remembered what he had said before. He immediately changed his words. The 9 heroes who didn't have time to breathe a sigh of relief suddenly had a sad look on their faces. Uxin couldn't help but laugh. Don't go back, it's simply hell. Prison. Yao Hua heard that he was going to train and suddenly hung his head. His dejected appearance made Uxin feel very refreshed. Oh. Listening to what you said, you don't want to go back? Do you want to accompany Uxin on this journey? Jin Jinwang raised his eyebrows and smiled. When the time comes, I will rush to the star field. I don't know how many years it will take for me to come back. Be prepared. Uxin rolled her eyes and smiled slightly. She fanned the flames on the side, as if she wanted to see the world in chaos. Countless black lines hung down from the forehead. Reporting to boss. We have been thinking too much recently and our bones are a little rusty. I think it should be time for training. Let's go home and train early. Hearing Uxin's words, Yao Hua's lips trembled and he quickly denied it. What kind of joke was this? Rush to the star field? What if they got lost in the universe? Not only Yao Hua, but even Jin Jinwang was a little surprised when he heard Uxin's words. He didn't expect that the latter had already made plans for the future. Although this plan was a little scary, he still nodded with appreciation. He then smiled at Yao Hua and the others and said, Since you all have this awareness, then quickly go back and wash yourselves clean. In the remaining 6 years, if you don't advance to Immortal 9th, damn, wasn't it Immortal 5th level? Why did it suddenly become Immortal 9th? The 9 heroes heard this and their legs went soft, and they almost knelt on the ground. It was a last-minute decision. Why? Do you have any objections? Then let's make it a half-demon. The Metal God King chuckled and raised the requirement by another level. No! On the mountain peak, an extremely tragic, earth-shattering, and ghost-like mournful scream suddenly rang out, scaring all the magical beasts in the mountain range into silence. The originally noisy forest suddenly became abnormally quiet. Uxin shook her head and smiled as she looked at the 9 heroes with snot and tears flowing down their faces. Her eyes looked towards the east where the sun was. She didn't need to be too anxious as her cultivation speed was already very fast. Moreover, for now, she didn't need to be in a hurry to cultivate. After all, without a goal, there wouldn't be any motivation. She just wanted to find out about her origins and didn't need to painstakingly increase her strength. Wandering around looking for miraculous items, collecting all kinds of godly items, leisurely strolling through the entire god realm should be enough, right? Peace isn't necessarily a kind of cultivation. Uxin smiled. Jin Jinwang laughed and waved his hand, causing the space barrier to collapse. He then looked at Uxin and said, Let's go, we'll send you to Xingming City. The rest of the journey will depend on yourselves. We old guys aren't as young and energetic as you guys. And let's go. Uxin also smiled and said. Jin Jinwang waved his hand and shattered the space, creating a space tunnel. Then, he led everyone into it. Uxin and the others slowly followed behind. As everyone disappeared, the place became quiet. A gentle breeze blew and the leaves rustled. Only the tombstone and the manor under the tree seemed to be telling something. Chapter 188. Star Underworld City was located at the center of the Sourcepeak region. As the only city in the entire Sourcepeak region with a complete set of spatial portals, its prosperity was second to none in the entire Sourcepeak region. With the ability of Jin Jinwang and the others, crossing this distance was as easy as snapping a finger. Therefore, when Uxin and the others passed through the spatial portal, it took them about half an hour to appear on a mountain range. Numerous portals spread out in all directions before their eyes. On the many roads they could see people coming and going. Even though they were so far away, Uxin could still hear the faint noise coming from below. In the sky above the mountain range, there were some sharp sounds of wind breaking. Then, they saw all kinds of rare and exotic beasts flapping their wings or stepping on the void to fly into the mountain range. Standing on the mountain peak, they could occasionally see one or two behemoths passing through space. They could even see the backs of their riders. Dragon, I also want one. Withdrawing her eyes from the small shadow that had turned into a small dot, Uxian said with envy. In her heart, she felt that riding a flying dragon in the sky would be very refreshing. The whole mountain range gave Uxian the first impression that there were so many people and so prosperous. She hadn't seen such a number of people and flying beasts in Red Star City. Perhaps only this city in the center of the Sourcepeak region could attract so many people. You already have a phoenix, yet you still want other things. Greedy. Hearing Uxian's low and inaudible mutterings, Yuin couldn't help but hold her forehead and transmit her voice. She knew that this guy's soul was hiding a phoenix egg. But it's just an egg. Our movement location is constantly changing. How can we do it without a means of transportation? Moreover, it's so boring to always fly with a divine tool. Uxian pouted her small mouth and transmitted her voice. Little star, you will be put in a sack for saying such words. Yuin was so angry that she laughed. A divine weapon was something that could only be dreamed of. Having one was already a heaven-sent opportunity. Moreover, the person who obtained it would be too late to worship it. You, on the other hand, have a divine tool on your butt all day long. What is there to be dissatisfied about? No, a divine artifact is a divine artifact. I want a dragon. Yuyin's cheeks puffed up and returned to normal. She kept repeating this over and over again. Uxian was actually acting like a spoiled child. Her coquettish voice gave Yuin goosebumps. Are you addicted to being little Shinshin? Yuin resisted the urge to ruthlessly ravage him and said, I had no choice. I was forced to do so. Uxian rubbed her forehead, stuck out her tongue, and said with a sweet smile, Born in the star field and fed on the stars, this also sounded like. It seems to be called that name. I also forgot. The ancient book that I once read seemed to have recorded things from the High Ancient Era. It could also be something from the Dark Era. Shi also frowned. Her young face was filled with bitter thoughts. An ancient book, huh? However, many of the records can no longer be verified. Regardless of whether it's the Ancient Era or the Dark Era, as long as it's true, I'll have one more record to add to the list of era-skipping life records in my memory, Violet Knight muttered. One more? Is there something else? Uxian was stunned. It was Shi who asked. The first one is me. Wasn't I sealed for 60 eras? Ziyi lightly snorted. Pfft. Shi curled her lips. However, she didn't refute. This was something that couldn't be refuted. Listening to the voices that kept coming into her ears, Uxian couldn't even get a word in. She could only roll her eyes at the two. Then, she looked at Yuin. The latter playfully stuck out her tongue and shrugged her shoulders. She also knew about the agreement between Ziyi and Uxian. Therefore, she wasn't surprised by her existence. This conversation, for the two, was tantamount to listening to a book from heaven. Jin Jinwang didn't hear the whispers of the four people. His golden eyes looked at the sky and then at the city in the distance. He nodded, turned around, and said to Uxian with a smile, Let's stop here. After entering the city, directly go to the central square, and you will find the teleportation gate. However, you will need to pay a fee. The cost is quite high. Hearing this, Uxian was so shocked that her small mouth formed an O shape. She seemed to have not recovered from her shock. However, after thinking about it for a while, she understood. After all, it took a lot of effort to construct a mysterious teleportation formation. Moreover, after using it for a long time, it would require the maintenance and cultivation of a formation master. Rather than keeping it hidden, it would be better to make it public. It would provide convenience for people and also bring in income. It was killing two birds with one stone. The realm of the gods was so vast that it was unimaginable. This was especially true for the divine land at the center. Therefore, in some cities in the four original regions and most places in the divine land, there were teleportation gates. This was to save time and effort on the journey. Of course, those who were equally strong naturally didn't need to waste time looking for teleportation gate. With their own strength, they could break through the void and make the space temporarily distort. This would shorten the time needed to reach their destination, which was more convenient. However, relatively speaking, the latter might be much shorter. Most of the founders of these teleportation gates were some of the top experts in the city. If these experts belonged to a family, the teleportation gate would naturally belong to that family. Of course, these extremely powerful families wouldn't be so stupid as to hide the teleportation gate. After all, if this kind of public channel was opened to the public, the profits earned every year would be enough to feed a family for dozens of generations. Therefore, the appearance of every teleportation gate would attract the jealousy of countless people. However, other than a few powerful families and sects, the rest could only watch helplessly. Not everyone could invite a formation master to spend a lot of effort to create a stable teleportation gate for you. Therefore, a teleportation gate was equivalent to a special symbol. It symbolized strength and wealth. Those who could own it were some of the famous first-rate forces. Of course, other than some families who enjoyed the protection of their ancestors. Generally, the energy required to cross the original regions is very large. The teleportation gate that is created is relatively larger. The distance between the original regions is too big. If it isn't stable enough, it might not be able to reach the destination. Moreover, if the angle is a little off, it would be 100 million. In order to avoid this situation, a lot of effort is naturally put in. Therefore, the cost is naturally more expensive. Jin Jinwang said with a smile. Yu Xian inexplicably shuddered. She suddenly remembered what Rui Ming had said. Why was the teleportation gate of the Red Star Academy the same? The so-called teleportation gate is actually connecting two different places together. Of course, there will occasionally be some deviation in the coordinates, and the connection will be wrong. As for the coordinates, if there is a slight difference, it will really be 100,000 miles apart. Seeing Yu Xian's worried face, Jin Jinwang thought for a while and comforted her. However, the teleportation gate is a fixed point between two places. Such a situation rarely happens. After all, as a public channel, if something were to happen, not only would it be difficult to explain, it would also be bad for the reputation. The forces behind the teleportation gate are very concerned about this. Therefore, they will naturally put in a lot of effort to maintain it. Generally, those special situations only have a 1 in 10 million chance of happening. Hearing this, Yu Xian nodded with a smile on the surface, but in her heart she couldn't help but mutter, Namo Amitabha, Buddha above, please don't let that 1 in 10 million chance fall on my head. Well, don't worry. Generally, as long as one's character is not that bad, there won't be any problems. Jin Jinwang put his hands on his hips and laughed. After laughing for a while, the Metal God King took out a 9-colored token from his wide sleeve. The token was in the shape of a small palace. On the top of the palace there were 9 unique colors written: metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, metal, thunder, and light. These were the unique symbols of the 9 elemental temple. Taking out the token, Jin Jinwang fiddled with it for a while. He smiled and gently placed it in Yu Xian's hand. This is the symbol and token of the Temple of Elements. The temple has built a lot of buildings in the Divine Continent. If you have any problems, you can go there with this token. When they see this token, they will do their best to help you. They will also believe everything you say. Yu Xian was a little surprised to see this cold 9-colored token. She smiled and solemnly put it in her pendant. She looked at Jin Wang and said, "Thank you, senior." Jin Wang patted her shoulder and smiled. "Originally, we wanted to take you directly to the temple so that we can take care of you. However, we don't want to force you. You must be careful." And hearing this, Uxian nodded and smiled. "Don't worry, nothing will happen to me. Of course, I know. I'm just reminding you." Jin Wang helplessly shook his head. This girl had too many treasures. Unless some elders took action, no one would be able to please her. "Child, if you're tired, you can come to our shrine and have a rest. That place will always be open for you." The beautiful woman stroked Uxian's head and said in a kind and gentle way, "Sister Uxian, be careful." Mu Ling and the others also stepped forward and hugged or shook hands with Uxian. They all knew of the latter's great ambition, but they did not know how long it would be before they could meet again. "I'm not going to the Temple of Light." Uxian also smiled and said goodbye to everyone. However, when she saw Yao Hua, her flower-like smile suddenly faded. Although she did not look at him coldly like before, she was unusually calm, causing Yao Hua's smile to suddenly freeze. Shui Gu, Shui Qing, and the others also nodded symbolically. However, the latter could not help but mutter, "Where did young Master Yun go?" Hearing her mention it, everyone was startled. When they were fighting the violet night dark flame, they didn't see that person. They couldn't help but shake their heads. That guy was very mysterious. No one knew where he went or what he was doing. Even Yi Shi was left behind. Thinking of this, Jin Wang could not help but look at Yi Shi. Yun Nuoxing was not around. What would she do? Seeing him look over, Yi Shi also rolled her eyes and said indifferently, "I'll wait for Brother Nu. You don't have to worry about me. He had something to do that day." "In that case, all right, I won't say anything more. Take care of yourselves." Jin Wang nodded and looked at the two of them. Then, with a flip of his palm, a sheepskin scroll with a magic formation carved on it appeared in his hand. He activated his divine power and injected it into the sheepskin scroll. Then, a silver-white spatial door slowly opened in front of them. Looking at the spatial door, Jin Wang laughed. His hand seals changed and the spatial door slowly expanded, enveloping everyone. He smiled and said, "Let's go, we will meet again in the future." The silver space door wriggled a little, and then the figures of Jin Wang and the others entered the door and disappeared. The space door also slowly dissipated a moment after they disappeared. Uxian closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then, she gently exhaled and looked at the empty space in front of her. She sighed and scratched her head in distress. Blue light surged on her face. After a while, the light dimmed and the face that belonged to Uxian disappeared. What appeared once again was that kind, slightly arrogant face with a smile at the corner of her mouth. "Brother is back." Seeing that Yun Nuoxing had regained his appearance, Ming let out a small laugh. He jumped and crawled into Yun Nuoxing's arms, rubbed against him twice, and kissed him on the cheek with his small mouth. Rubbing Ming's head, a gentle and doting expression appeared on Yun Nuoxing's face. The loneliness that rose in his heart because of the separation was greatly diluted. "Little Star is back." Yuan smiled and rubbed his head. She carried Little Purple Soul and placed it on his shoulder. She knew that a certain someone who couldn't stand the separation would be depressed for a while. It was a good choice to let the two girls distract him. He looked at Yuan, who had nothing to do with him, with some resentment in his eyes. He seemed to be complaining that she had thrown the task of taking care of the child to him. However, this emotion only flashed for a moment, and he did not say anything. "Well, if the old man turns around and looks at this place it will be fun," Yi Shi said with a smile. Yun Nuoxing smiled and looked at the mountain range in the distance. Then, he looked at Yi Shi and hesitated for a moment. Finally, he said, "Are you really going to go with me?" Hearing this, Yi Shi rolled her eyes and snorted softly. She muttered, "Brother Nuo, I've said it 10 times already. Don't ask any more questions. I said I'm going with you, so I'm going with you." Yun Nuoshing scratched his head and laughed foolishly. He didn't say anything else. If he said anything else, it would make him seem a little pretentious. Let's go and see how magnificent that teleportation gate is. Yun Nuoshing laughed loudly. He spread his 6 wings and flew towards the mountain range with them. Chapter 189. As the center of the entire origin region, it was compatible with things that other places didn't have. At the same time, it was also an important transportation hub. Many races would converge here. Therefore, this important city was also the kind of big city that was easily hundreds of thousands of li in length and width. It was even close to 1,000,000 li in size. There was no need to mention the number of people in such a big city. Moreover, it was in the middle of summer, so it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that there was a sea of sweat here, on the streets that extended in all directions. The end of each road led to the center of Xingming City. That was where all the transmission gates were located, including the important transmission gates that led to several other big regions in the origin region, as well as some transmission gates that led to other places. Legend had it that in the previous eras there were also transmission gates that led to ancient life stars. However, because the transmission within the star field required more energy than the transmission between the origin region, it seemed to have changed the method. As for the specifics, Yun Nuoshing and the others weren't clear about it yet. They didn't stop along the way. The center of Xingming City was hundreds of thousands of li away from the city wall. Even with the speed of Yun Nuoshing and the others, it would take them more than half a month to reach there, provided that Yun Nuoshing didn't use the light element. Unfortunately, Yi Shi said that while Xingming City was excessively big, there were also many hidden experts. This made him not dare to use the light element without restraint. The name of the goddess of origin region was very well known. If by any chance they were recognized, there would be some unnecessary trouble. Therefore, along the way, Yun Nuoshing and the others didn't use the light element or divine tools. They completely relied on their own strength to fly. Yun Nuoshing's situation was a little better. Her 6 wings could automatically attract the wind element, so it didn't take too much effort to fly. On the other hand, Yu'in had to fly continuously for a long time. Even if she cultivated the strongest profound technique, it was still a little unbearable. Therefore, they flew and stopped. They traveled during the day and rested at night. This leisurely way of traveling extended the time by a lot, but at least it wasn't that strenuous. And when they stopped to rest, they would naturally come into contact with other people. During this time, they heard a lot of discussions about the purple night dark flame. It seemed that the number of people who were paying attention to this matter was not small. Very few matters of the cultivation world were spread to the common people. Other than those extremely tragic extermination matters, or major matters that concern the entire god realm, other matters would generally not be spread too widely. It seemed that such a widely known matter like this was rare. Under such circumstances, whenever Yun Nuoshing and the others stopped at the restaurant to rest, they would be secretly criticized. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. His hand that was gripping his chopsticks almost broke them because of his excessive strength. Brother is so famous. In Yun Nuoshing's arms, Ming could not help but laugh when he heard the sounds coming from below. Yun Nuoshing almost lost control of the 6-winged falcon and almost crashed, pinching Ming's chubby cheeks. Yun Nuoshing felt that there was a ball of fire in her chest that she could not release. She was so angry that even her breathing became disordered. I only used the light element in that instant, right? Even that was recognized? Eyebrows trembling, Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath. Speaking of which, didn't the annihilation of the purple night dark star engulf everyone? Why are there still rumors about it? Yi Shi thought for a moment, then said, when they retreated for the first time, there were probably people who retreated at that time. The light element is a special element, it's hard to forget once you see it. Little star, oh little star, you can't even listen to rumors. At this time, Purple Night joked in Yun Nuoxing's mind, causing him to roll his eyes. He did not pay attention to the two people who were putting on a show, and hurriedly increased his speed, streaking across the sky. The few people who knew Yun Nuoxing's thoughts did not ask for any rest. They all followed him and flew forward with all their might. However, Yun Nuoxing was not the kind of person who would ignore others for his own sake. Thus, he would stop to rest after flying for a period of time, so that they would not tire themselves out. During this much faster journey, the few of them finally arrived at the teleportation gate cluster area in the center of Xingming City after about a month. It was an incomparably vast plaza. The entire plaza was built with a kind of cyan stone. Numerous stone pillars were arranged in an orderly manner in the plaza, like a huge stone passageway. These stone pillars were also made with that kind of cyan stone. When the sun poured down on this area, it reflected a faint cyan light that was somewhat cold, appearing somewhat mysterious. At the center of the plaza was a huge cyan stone pillar that reached straight into the sky. From the bottom to the tip, it became thinner and thinner. Numerous runes and formations that could not be understood and dismantled were intertwined together, flickering with resplendent silver light. Dense silver spatial energy curled around the entire stone pillar. In front of this cyan stone pillar, the size of a person was simply insignificant. Looking up at this stone pillar of unknown height was like looking up at a large tree. With the stone pillar as the center, there were many platforms built with pale yellow stone. They were several dozen meters tall, and steps were distributed in all four directions. At the top, there were 3 overlapping stone rings that constantly rotated. Numerous mysterious runes and tiny formations were displayed on the 3 stone rings, and the tiny formations constantly flickered on and off. A cylindrical curtain of light hung down from the 1,000-meter-tall stone rings. The curtain of light was composed of countless tiny silver-blue energy needles. Boundless spatial energy radiated from it, and the fluctuations of this spatial energy could be felt from very, very far away. The 3 stone rings are used to determine the location or to fix the spatial coordinates, so as to stabilize the connection between 2 portals, Yi she said softly. Around the stone platform, there were many stone pillars that were hundreds of meters tall. The formations engraved on the ground were also thousands of meters long and wide. Strands of silver spatial energy wandered in the stone marks on the ground, which were fixed at a point in the center of the stone formations. These portals or stone formations were always in operation. Occasionally, a group of people would rush into the curtain of light or stand in the stone formations, allowing themselves to be teleported away by the dense spatial energy. However, some people would rush out from the other side and look around before flying towards the edge of the plaza in the distance. This plaza is too big. Floating at the edge of the plaza, Yun Nuoxing looked at the huge pillar and casually sized up the green plaza. She could not help but swallow her saliva and lick her dry lip. She bitterly smiled and said, "The area of this plaza is not much smaller than that of Yuyan City. Is this still a plaza? It is a bit too big." Yu-Yin also looked at the plaza in a daze. She withdrew her gaze from the hundreds or thousands of portals and stone formations and could not help but wipe her sweat. Why are there so many portals? Where do they lead to? That huge pillar will automatically attract the spatial energy drifting in the vicinity of Xingming City and use it as an energy hub to gather a huge amount of energy, which will then be transmitted to the portals below. This avoids the trouble of thousands of different energies stirring up the spatial energy and causing the spatial energy to become chaotic. Only a stable spatial energy can send the people using the portals to the right place, Yi she said. Sigh, it's quite convenient. But in this case, there should be someone managing this plaza, right? Yun Nuoxing suddenly realized and asked. This is jointly managed by the powerful forces in Xingming City and the forces that own the portals. Those extremely shrewd people will not be so generous as to throw away their own treasures. If the portals are damaged, that force will suffer a great loss, she said with a smile. These are all fixed-point portals that permanently connect two places. There is another type of portals, which are coordinate portals. As the name suggests, you need to input coordinates to teleport. That type is unidirectional, but it is more convenient, she said. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing suddenly remembered that she had discussed with Ruiming before. The portable portals of the Red Star Academy seemed to require the input of coordinate. She felt that those portals were much more convenient than fixed-point portals, but they were also much more difficult. Things like spatial coordinates need to be determined through arrays. Those arrays can also reach the level of divine rank. Generally, as long as you have been to a place before, the accuracy of the coordinates can reach 90%. As for places that you have never been to, I estimate that the accuracy is less than 40%. Suddenly hearing this dry laugh, Yun Nuoxing's forehead darkened. So this thing is also so unsafe? There are so many, which one is it? Ming also raised his little head at this time. Looking at the groups of stone arrays and the endless bluestone plaza, his little head felt a little dizzy. His little hand tugged at Yun Nuoxing's long hair as he quickly asked. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. She scratched her head and analyzed a little. Looking at the pillar that reached the sky, she said, "The portals between the origin regions should be the most energy-intensive, right? That should be the centermost position." That is indeed the case. She was startled and smiled bitterly. Yuan also nodded in agreement. Then, together with Yun Nuoxing, they flew toward the pillar that reached the sky in the center. Along the way, he saw many flashing teleportation portals with people constantly flying out and then rushing into another one. It was as if this place was a transit station. Every teleportation portal was guarded by a group of guards. They looked dignified, had cold expressions, and held spears in their hands and wore black armor. Everyone who wanted to use the portals had to pay a considerable sum of money to these guards before they could enter. Along the way, Yun Nuo Planet saw many guards who were dressed differently. The symbols on their bodies were also different. It was obvious that they did not belong to the same faction. The teleportation portals and stone arrays of all the factions were piled up here. However, it made sense when one thought about it. A formation master could weave a teleportation portal array with all his heart and soul. If they belonged to the same faction, how many masters or grandmasters would be needed to complete this world-class square? As Yun Nuoxing and the others got closer and closer to the stone pillar, the portals around them grew larger and larger. Some were even as tall as tens of thousands of meters. Just now, they were too far away to pay attention to these portals. All their attention was focused on the stone pillar. Now that they were shuttling through the portals, most of their attention was naturally attracted. It was normal that they did not see such tall portals. 10 minutes later, Yun Nuoxing and the others slowly stopped charging forward. They slowly raised their heads to a 90-degree angle. Their eyes were filled with shock and incomprehension. In 4 directions around the stone pillar, there were 4 portals that were tens of thousands of meters tall. Countless thin and long silver needles condensed from the power of space through arrays fell from the sky, forming a shocking silver-blue waterfall that covered the entire sky. Just the base of the portals was tens of thousands of meters tall, densely packed together. Yun Nuoxing felt dizzy just looking at it. She only wanted to curse. Damn it! Why did they make the portals so tall for no reason? It's a waste of materials and manpower. Touching his face, Yun Nuoxing could not help but ridicule. His gaze turned to the side and looked at the bottom of the small heavenly pillar in front of him. Close to the huge pillar, there was a teleportation door formed by a purple stone platform quietly standing there. Unlike other portals that were open, this purple portal was not open. The 3 positioning stone rings were quietly lying on the purple stone platforms. They were tens of thousands of meters long and hundreds of meters tall, and there was no movement at all. Retracting her gaze, Yun Nuoshing led the others to the portal in front of them. Compared to other portals, this portal seemed to be much more deserted. There were not many people waiting at this place. There were only a few scattered people who quietly threw down a card and then rushed into the light curtain and disappeared. Little Shi, you're an array master. Can you create this portal? Yun Nuoshing suddenly asked. Yi Shi was startled for a moment. She tilted her head and looked at Yun Nuoshing. Although she was an array master, she had never written such a complicated array before. After a long while, Yi Shi nodded gently. She frowned and said, "It should be possible? I have a certain level of understanding of spatial coordinate. As long as I leave an array at the place I want to go and then draw it here, I can open the portal. If I want to fix it and turn it into what Big Brother Noah saw, it will require a lot of materials that contain the power of space." Yun Nuoshing shook her head and hurriedly said, No. What I mean is if you haven't been to that place before and don't have an array to draw it. Hearing this, Yi Shi could not help but raise her eyebrows. She smiled mockingly and stretched out her hand in front of Yun Nuoshing. She smiled faintly and said, I can. There's a 50% chance that the portal I open will deviate from the destination by more than 100 million kilometers. Everyone. Yun Nuoshing shuddered and laughed dryly. She hurriedly walked toward the portal in front of her. Forget about this. It's 100 million kilometers wide. Who knows where you'll open the portal? Hello, may I ask where this portal leads to? Walking in front of the guards, Yun Nuoshing cupped his fists and said politely. He saw that these guards were quite kind and calm, unlike the other cold-faced gods. He felt that it should be easy to communicate with them. The guard in cyan armor raised his head and glanced at him. He smiled faintly and said, Kid, is this your first time here? Yun Nuoshing scratched his head embarrassedly and nodded gently. Seeing Yun Nuoshing nod in confirmation, the guard could not help but look at him a few more times. Then, he said, This is the portal to the extreme plane region. Kid, do you want to go? It really is the 4 origin regions. Yun Nuoshing muttered in his heart. Then, he took out a blue card from the ring on his finger and stuffed it into the guard's hand. He whispered, Can you tell me which portal leads to the Divine Prefecture? The guard received the card and looked at him in surprise. He casually put it away and pointed to the portal in the north that was also closed. He said, That's the portal to the Divine Prefecture. After that, he pointed to the east and south and said, The Ganyuan region and the Kuanyuan region. However, you came at the wrong time. You just happened to bump into the portal to the Divine Prefecture, which is now closed due to malfunction. After saying that, the guard spread out his hands and looked regretfully at the closed teleportation gate. Yun Nuoshing was stunned. He widened his eyes and slapped his forehead. He exclaimed, A 1 in 10 million chance. Chapter 190. That seems to be the case, but I don't know the exact reason. There's no connection between the portals of the 4 major regions. Other than knowing that someone else's portal is closed due to malfunction, I don't know anything else. The guard was slightly surprised when he heard the words that came out of Yun Nuoshing's mouth. Then, he nodded and explained softly. Perhaps it was because of the card that carried a lot of weight, but the guard's attitude and tone were not bad. Then what should I do if I want to go to the Divine Continent? Yun Nuoshing suddenly felt his lips trembling slightly. His mouth felt a little dry. Without the portal, how could he go to the Divine Continent? After going through so much trouble to get to Xingming City, now the portal was right in front of him, but he couldn't use it. This feeling was like a foodie who had been hungry for 1,000 years and saw delicious food in front of him, but he was locked up. It's not that there's no way to go, but it's not that safe. The guard couldn't help but chuckle when he saw him frowning and frowning. What's the way? Yun Nuoshing's spirit was slightly lifted, and he quickly asked with a little more urgency in his tone. Those stone arrays are space portals. You can still go to the divine continent with them, but— The guard pointed to the stone arrays carved into the ground and surrounded by 4 or 8 stone pillars. In the end, he paused for a moment. Someone was locked in the portal and thrown out of the realm of the gods, right? Seeing him pause, Yun Nuoxing recalled what Rui Ming said about a certain senior being thrown into the star region. His eyebrows immediately twitched and he continued. That's right. The guard couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. He seemed to be used to this kind of thing. Hearing his confirmation, Yun Nuoxing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It's fine if the portals are unstable, but why is your fixed one also unstable? Alright, I'll think about it. Scratching his head, Yun Nuoxing cupped his hands and led the others slowly toward the portal that belonged to the divine continent. Little star, are we really going to use that tunnel? Yuan took a step forward and stood shoulder to shoulder with Yun Nuoxing. She tilted her head and asked. Ruiming had once told them about it in an exaggerated manner, which left a dangerous mark in their hearts. Now, it seemed that they still had to use this trick to go to the Divine Land. Last time, they crossed half of the origin region and deviated by a month. This time, they crossed the origin region. How far should they deviate? Although he didn't have a specific destination to begin with, Yun Nuoxing wiped the cold sweat off her forehead and said, let's see how it goes? If there's really no other way, I'll create a temporary teleportation gate. Although it'll deviate far, far away, it's still better than being thrown into the god realm. She smiled as she gently shook Yun Nuoxing's hand. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. I'd better think about it first. She looked at the teleportation gate in the divine continent. There, a large group of people surrounded the guards in purple armor and seemed to be arguing about something. Everyone's faces were flushed red. Even though they were far away, Yun Nuoxing could hear the fierce argument. In any case, we won't reach the divine continent peacefully. Seeing the place that was as noisy as a market, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but sigh. She led Yi Shi and the others and slowly walked toward it. Why is the teleportation gate in the divine continent broken all of a sudden? Give us a clear answer as to whether we can open it or not. Our time is very precious. Do you still want to live? Facing the agitated crowd, the guards didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They made it sound as if they didn't want to open the teleportation gate. However, they couldn't do anything about the teleportation gate being broken. The ones who were more heartbroken were undoubtedly them. Every day that the teleportation gate was closed was a huge loss to their forces. Everyone, calm down and listen to me. We're very sorry that the teleportation gate is broken. The experts in our family are trying to find a way to solve this problem. At this time, the teleportation gate can be used as an alternative. If you're in a hurry, why don't you use the teleportation gate to go to the divine continent first? If you're not in a hurry, you can stay and wait for a while. A young guard in purple and gold armor stepped out from the crowd and bowed deeply to the crowd. He quickly smiled apologetically. The aura around this person was much stronger than the other guards. Judging by his attire, he should have a high status among the guards. He should be a guard leader or something like that. How long will it take for the teleportation gate to be repaired? Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing squeezed out of the crowd and asked loudly. Although she hadn't used the teleportation gate before, she subconsciously thought that the teleportation gate should be safer than the teleportation gate. If it didn't take long, it didn't matter if they stayed and waited. After all, they weren't in a hurry. As soon as this question came out, the crowd nodded at once. Then, they opened their mouths and asked one after another. This about 2 months. The young man touched his face and answered with a trembling voice. However, his heart was beating like a drum. After all, he received the news from his family that it would take at least half a year and at most a month. This time, the portal seems to be in a lot of trouble. It's been open for so many years, and we've only checked it once in a while. There hasn't been any major problems. I didn't expect that this time, even the positioning circle's array formation is about to disappear. But at this time, the family's array formation master actually went on a trip and won't be back for at least half a year. It's troublesome even if I want to invite him. Those guys are so arrogant, they're like big Buddhas. The young man muttered in his heart and looked at the crowd with a fawning expression. Some of the people here had forces behind them that even they didn't want to offend. Now, there seemed to be no other way except to apologize. What kind of international joke is this? 2 months? You might as well go to sh*t. f***cku. 2 months? Is this what you mean by a period of time? Don't you know that time is precious? As soon as the young man's voice fell, the crowd broke out in dissatisfaction. 2 months? They could afford to wait for 2 days, but 2 months? If you're in a hurry, we can provide a space channel for free. Our clan's space channel is still very stable and won't have that kind of situation. If you're not satisfied, you can come here to teleport in the future. We won't charge you. What do you think? The young man rolled his neck and said with a trembling voice. Now, the only way left is to take the space channel or teleport to another origin region and then to the Divine Land. The other teleportation gates may not necessarily be broken. When the crowd heard this, they all frowned. After thinking for a while, they nodded and turned to leave amidst a wave of whispers and angry curses. They seemed to have accepted the young man's suggestion and went to change. Before leaving, they didn't forget to glare at him. He could only smile bitterly and feel very aggrieved in his heart. In less than a dozen seconds, the crowd that had besieged and demanded an explanation just now retreated like the tide. It seemed that they would rather pay a higher price to teleport twice than use that dangerous space channel, no matter how nicely they said it. When the crowd retreated, the young man also heaved a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to turn around and walk back, he saw that Yun Nuoxing and the others were still standing there. His expression instantly became a little strange. Could it be that he wanted to use the space channel? Seeing the young man staring at her in a daze, Yun Nuoxing was also stunned. She glanced around and found that only her group was left standing here. Her face couldn't help but tremble. Was the space channel really so dangerous that he didn't want to use it after hearing about it? Little brother, do you want to use the space channel? The young man knocked on his helmet and asked with a hint of hesitation on his face. Yun Nuoxing turned to look at Yishi. The latter rolled her eyes at him and opened her little mouth to transmit her voice. Brother Nua, go ahead if you want to use it. It's not a bad idea to let you experience the space channel. Hearing this, a hint of awkwardness flashed across Yun Nuoxing's face. He really did want to play around. The last time he used the space channel, it was Ruiming's portable channel. What would it be like if he used a fixed channel this time? His eyes flashing for a moment, Yun Nuoxing nodded. He also knew that the teleportation gate might be a little safer, but he thought it was too expensive. When he was at the Ultimate Plane Region's teleportation gate, he took a glance at the fees paid by those people and was immediately shocked. If he really used the teleportation gate with the 5 of them, 4 or 5 times would probably be enough for him to run out of money. He still had to travel across the entire realm of the gods. In order to prevent any accidents, it was better to save some money for the journey. Seeing Yun Nuoxing nod, the young man's eyes widened. He stared at Yun Nuoxing for a good while before saying, If you want to use the space channel, then follow me. After saying that, he gestured with his hand and made a please gesture. Yun Nuoxing didn't hesitate. He held Yishi's hand and walked up to the teleportation gate. Beside him, Yin opened her mouth as if she wanted to dissuade him, but when she saw the determination in his eyes, she didn't know what to say. She sighed, hugged Little Purple Soul, and followed after him. The young man looked at them in surprise again, but he didn't hesitate. He ordered the guards to return to their posts and hurriedly led the way. After walking for a few minutes, they stopped next to the platform of the teleportation gate. Near the platform, there was a stone formation that was several times smaller than the teleportation gate. 8 purple stone pillars stood in the 8 directions of the stone formation. The entire stone formation was covered in a thick layer of dust, and there were a few spider webs around it. It seemed like it hadn't been used for a long time. This thing hasn't been used by anyone for decades. Yun Nuoxing's eyes were wide open when he saw the dilapidated state of the stone formation. His heart suddenly jumped. As a product of the first generation, the teleportation gate was neglected after the second generation's new product, due to its instability and other reasons. In comparison, the teleportation gate is much safer and less time-consuming. Over time, only some small places still use the teleportation gate to travel to and from each other. Large places like this are all using the teleportation gate to communicate with each other. Yi, she said softly. The young man waved his hand and swept away the dust, revealing a stone formation made of purple stones. Mysterious runes were carved on the ground, reflecting a gorgeous purple light under the sunlight. Little brother, are you sure you want to use the teleportation gate? The young man glanced at the stone formation, but still looked at Yun Nuoxing worriedly. The teleportation gate is the predecessor of the teleportation gate. Both of them are the same. It's fine as long as we can reach it. My moral quality is still very strong. Nothing will happen. Yun Nuoxing felt the young man's worry, but he smiled and said, "This. If you insist, then I can't say anything else. Stand in the middle of the stone formation. I will try my best to use the most accurate coordinates to teleport you safely." Hearing this, the young man nodded and solemnly carved something on the 8 stone pillars. The 8 stone pillars also emitted a bright light, and a magic formation appeared out of thin air and slowly rotated. The energy matrix in the formation was slightly adjusted according to the young man's hand gestures. "Where in the Divine Prefecture are you going? The western region, the northern wilderness, the eastern sea, or the southern plains?" The young man took the time to ask Yun Nuoxing while urging the energy to adjust the coordinates of the magic formation. Hearing these 4 names, Yun Nuoxing, who was walking around, stopped and was stunned. He was a little dumbfounded. After thinking for a while, he said, "Let's go to the western region." "All right, Starry Universe City in the western region of the Divine Prefecture." Hearing this, the young man nodded. His hands danced and left afterimages. Streams of majestic energy were continuously injected into the magic formation, causing the purple stone pillars to shine brighter. Standing in the center of the magic formation, Yun Nuoxing looked at the stone formation that was 100 feet long and wide. He discovered that other than the different colors, it was no different from the stone formations outside. Majestic spatial energy was channeled into the 8 stone pillars, and then into the magic formation below, gathering at the center. Buzz! After a while, the stone formation emitted a slight buzzing sound. Vast spatial energy as vast as the sea circled around Yun Nuoxing and the others, causing their robes to flutter in the wind. The bright silver light almost drowned their figures. "Little brother, take this. Inject energy and it will open the transportation channel. In the future, with this token, you won't need to pay to go to the transportation channel that belongs to our clan." Outside the array, the young man was panting slightly as he completed the last hand seal. Then, he clapped his palms together, making a crisp sound. Then, he took out a purple gold token from his ring and stuck it on a stone pillar. The energy matrix inside the token was rewritten and engraved. Then, he threw the token into the center of the stone array and yelled, "Master!" Yun Nuoxing reached out to take the token. He placed it in his palm and looked at it. He discovered that there was a large Xian character written on it. This made Yun Nuoxing stunned. In the current Pantheon realm, the only clan with the surname Xian who had the energy to construct such a huge transportation channel was the Xian clan, one of the 8 ancient clans. "All right," Yun Nuoxing responded in a loud voice. Origin energy surged out from his body and poured into the token in his hand. Suddenly, the spatial energy circling around him seemed to be attracted and wrapped around Yun Nuoxing and the others. In just a few breaths' time, the bright silver light completely drowned their figures. The dazzling light caused them to disappear from the young man's sight. Boom! The space shook violently for a moment. Suddenly, a silver crack opened slowly. The silver light enveloped Yun Nuoxing and the others, and they plunged into it. The spatial crack also disappeared after they entered. The young man looked at the crack and saw that the stone formation had returned to normal. He looked at the eastern sky and shook his head with a sigh. Then, he slowly walked back. Chapter 191. Within the silver spatial tunnel, the scenery outside their line of sight had all turned into a long, thin line. They couldn't see the outside world, so they naturally couldn't locate it. The silver spatial wall suddenly squirmed, and a ball of light shrouded in silver light appeared. It paused in this blurry area for a while, then sped towards the front of the tunnel. A moment later, the upper part of the silver ball of light slowly faded away, revealing Yun Nuoxing and the others. As soon as they came out, they sized up this silver tunnel. Looking at the outside world that had become extremely blurry and almost pitch black, their eyes revealed some surprise. Last time, when we used Rui Ming's portable spatial tunnel, it didn't seem to be so fast. Seeing the outside of the silver spatial wall become a black line, Yun Nuoxing thought back to the first time they used the spatial tunnel. At that time, they could still vaguely see the outside world, but now they couldn't see anything at all. After all, one is portable, and this one is specially used for teleportation. Yu-Yin withdrew her gaze, sat down cross-legged in the silver ball of light supporting them, and said with a smile. Nodding, Yun Nuoxing lowered her head. Below her feet was a bright white ball of light. It was solid. She stretched and sat down. Stroking Ming's head in her arms, she slightly adjusted her position to let her sleep more comfortably. However, Brother Nuo, you guys are really brave. When other people heard that we were going to use the spatial tunnel, their faces all turned red. Patting Yun Nuoxing's thigh, Yishi also made do with lying down. She dragged out her voice and said with a yawn, I think my character is still very strong. I shouldn't be so unlucky. Yes. Yun Nuoxing laughed dryly. That person just said the western regions, the northern wastelands, and so on. Are they places in the divine prefecture? Yun Nuoxing asked. Yishi was playing with her long black hair. She nodded and said, the divine prefecture is also divided into several regions. To the north is the northern wasteland, to the east is the largest ocean in the God realm, the Eastern Sea. To the south is the southern plains, and to the west is the western region. These 4 regions each occupy a piece of land. After pausing for a moment, Yishi blinked her small eyes and shook her head. She continued, although there are also 4 great regions, the vastness of each of these 4 regions is comparable to an origin region. Doesn't that mean that the divine land is equivalent to the area of 4 origin regions? Yun Nuoxing gasped. That's not all. Yishi raised a finger and smiled mysteriously. But it won't be fun if I say it out loud. Let's wait for Brother Nuo to explore it himself. Rolling her eyes, Yun Nuoxing suddenly paused in the middle of smoothing out Ming's hair. She looked at Yu-Yin as though she had thought of something. She asked in confusion, Sister Yu-Yin, are you sure it's okay for you to follow us like this? Yu-Yin froze for a moment when she saw that the topic was suddenly directed at her. She raised her right eyebrow and looked at Yun Nuoxing. Is there a problem? No, didn't you say that you would wait until we reached Xingming City and see if we were going home? Is it really okay for you to leave like this? What about your father? Yun Nuoxing scratched her head and said. Yu-Yin and Mei Mao froze for a few seconds when they heard that. Then, she suddenly shouted, I completely forgot about it. Yun Nuoxing was speechless. Her cheeks twitched a few times. How heartless could she be to forget about going home? Forget it. Let's ignore him. Anyway, I said that I would see if we were going home or not. Now that things have turned out like this, there's no need to continue. Then, she shrugged and stuck out her tongue. She patted Yun Nuoshing's head and smiled. Also, I'm worried about this little dumb star hanging in the sky. I can't bear to leave your sister behind. Yun Nuoshing pouted and rolled her eyes when she heard that. I'm not a child anymore. Why can't I let go? However, thinking about it was just thinking about it. This feeling of being missed by someone was pretty good. He had no relatives or friends, so he only had friends as his last consolation. However, thinking about it carefully, they had been traveling together for almost 5 years. Time really passed very quickly. It slipped by like sand on one's fingertips. Calculating the time, it seemed that it had been almost 7 years since Yun Nuoshing crawled out from the desert. He had been searching for his past. Although Xian Yin should have solved the mystery of his past that had troubled him for so long, she said that she wanted him to solve all the mysteries by himself, and that he couldn't say anything. Therefore, in fact, there was still no practical progress in his matters in the past 7 years. Although there was no progress, Yun Nuoshing wasn't in a hurry. Compared to the first 2 years of searching for his past, he seemed to have let go of a lot and stopped searching. Xian Yin said that he needed to have all his energy until he could face everything that he would have to face after he recovered his memories. Then, he would have everything that he had in the past. Then, there was no use for him to be anxious. After all, he was only a small, ordinary cultivator now. He was still too far away from a level that even deities had to treat seriously. Xian Yin's cultivation was also a powerful cultivator in the later stages of the divine level. She was even stronger than the previous owner of the Purple Night Dark Flame. A secret that even a powerful cultivator of this level had to protect was definitely not something trivial. That secret was definitely very important. With his current strength, he might not be qualified to know about it. However, he was confident that with his talent, he could cultivate to that level. It seemed very difficult. Those deities are all trying to be mysterious. I really can't help but want to hang them up and beat them up. As he thought about it, Purple Knight's complaining voice suddenly sounded in his heart. Yun Nuoshing couldn't help but smile bitterly. It wasn't the first time she said this. It seemed that her previous owner had said something mysteriously. Now that he had refined her and seen his memories, he also saw Xian Yin's mysteriousness and didn't know what she had said. Now, according to the hint from the heaven-defying ultimate god, the first stop of the divine land was right in front of him. This made Yun Nuoshing feel a little excited. What exactly was waiting for him? What was waiting for him to experience? Yin turned her head and saw Yun Nuoshing's unconcealable smile. She couldn't help but ask, "What are you thinking about? Why are you smiling so happily?" "I'm thinking that I don't need to look for the divine soul fruit anymore, right?" Yun Nuoshing scratched his head and smiled. Since Xian Yin said that what was supposed to happen would happen, he only needed to focus on improving his strength. The memories would slowly unravel as his strength increased. "I don't think there's a need?" Yin thought about it and said. Now that she knew a little about him, she knew that she couldn't use special methods to unlock his memories in advance. "Big brother, your current memories are equivalent to being locked by countless locks. Increasing your strength is the best key. Don't know everything too early. Otherwise, it won't be good for you or for us. As your cultivation increases, the dusty memories will be revealed, and everything sealed in ice will melt. Brother, you must remember that no matter what you see in the recovered memories, you must use your complete rationality to control yourself. Whether it's now or in the future, don't let yourself lose your rationality. You must not lose control." In that year, Xian Yin had repeatedly reminded Yun Nuoshing of many things. Some of them made Yun Nuoshing confused, and some of them even confused him. However, he remembered all of them. Since it was Xian Yin who reminded him, it was definitely true. He did not believe that Xian Yin would bear to hurt him. Time passed quietly. When Yun Nuoxing opened his eyes again, a day had already passed. Looking at the black environment around him, only the silver spatial barrier was the main theme of this monotonous world. Although he didn't know exactly how fast it was, Yun Nuoxing was sure that it was faster than the speed of light. However, he didn't know why the time didn't flow back as he imagined. He couldn't explain it either. He could only attribute it to the fact that the spatial tunnel had fixed the space at the same time while exceeding the speed of light. Yi Shi looked up and saw his puzzled expression. She blinked and explained very understandingly, even if it exceeds the speed of light, if you can't control the power of time, you can't turn back time. However, Brother Nua's thinking isn't wrong. Yun Nuoxing shrugged. Time was an illusory thing. Although it floated in every inch of space, whether or not it could be controlled was still a problem. He raised his hand, and the purple gold Xian family token appeared in his palm. It was glowing faintly and constantly flashing. It seemed like they were about to reach their destination. Are we almost there? Yu Yin also noticed the status of the token. She stretched lazily, revealing her graceful curves, and said softly in a lazy voice. Yes, we should be almost there. The token is reacting, which means we should be close to the exit. Looking at the bright tunnel ahead, Yun Nuoxing stretched his neck and yawned. Brother, where are we now? In his arms, Ming turned around and rubbed her little eyes. She opened them slightly and looked at the endless darkness on both sides. We're in the sky above the divine mainland. Yun Nuoxing patted her little head and smiled. But I can't see anything. At the side, little purple soul yawned and mumbled softly. Hee hee. Yun Nuoxing chuckled and patted her head. He didn't explain anything. He couldn't explain it in professional terms. Time passed quietly. In the blink of an eye, another half a day had passed. The token in Yun Nuoxing's hand was glowing with a dazzling purple light. Purple dots of light contained the power of silver space. They were circling around the token. It seemed like it was ready to activate. Let's go. We've reached our destination. Yun Nuoxing tossed the purple gold token in his hand and pulled the others to their feet. He smiled and poured his origin energy into the token through his palm. He wanted to open an exit for the spatial tunnel. However, the silver light they expected didn't appear. The silver ball of light under their feet was abnormally quiet. There was no movement at all. They were still surrounded by the silver spatial barrier. It was still dark and chilling outside. It didn't seem like it had any intention of slowing down. Yun Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. He thought that he didn't use enough origin energy, so he hurriedly urged his origin energy and poured it into the token. But no matter how much energy he used, the token, the silver ball of light, and the spatial passageway didn't have the slightest movement. What's going on? Seeing that there was no movement, Yu Yin hurriedly gathered around and grabbed the token to examine it. In just a few moments, the light around the token seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. It seemed like they were getting closer and closer to their destination. However, the space around them was unbelievably quiet. If they waited until the light was at its brightest, they would have reached their destination. After thinking about it, Yun Nuoxing was still a little worried. He formed a hand seal and brought out the heaven refining array. It shrunk to the size of a person and enveloped the Linghong sword completely. The heaven refining array merged with Linghong Jian, causing the light on his body to become even more resplendent. It was even a little dazzling. Vigorous, colorful energy filled this space passage. The power of space spread out like a vast ocean, causing the space barrier to tremble a little. Without the spontaneous spatial energy, it will be difficult to break the spatial tunnel with just the spatial energy of the Linghong sword. This is not the space of the outside world. Seeing how desperate he was, Yishi could not help but roll her eyes at him. She struggled out of his arms and put her hand on Yun Nuoxing's palm. Then, she said softly, release the suppression that the Linghong sword has on me. The Linghong sword has cut off my connection with the spatial energy. Hearing that, Yun Nuoxing was a little stunned. She stared blankly at the silver-blue long needle, not knowing what to do. After thinking about it, she directly stuffed the Linghong sword into Yishi's hand. You do it. I don't know how to do it. As soon as the Linghong sword was in her hand, a terrifying and majestic spatial energy mixed with Yun Nuoxing's energy appeared in her senses. This was the first time she came into contact with the Linghong sword. The extremely terrifying energy made her tremble in fear. This is the power of a divine weapon. Taking a deep breath, Yishi quickly calmed herself down. She grabbed Yun Nuoxing with her other hand and held the Linghong sword in front of her with her right hand. She stared at the token that was glowing brighter and brighter. She was not in a hurry to break the space with her sword in an instant. She was waiting for the best opportunity, the moment when they were the closest to their destination, to wave the sword in her hand. Narrowing her eyes slightly, Yun Nuoxing also knew what Yishi was thinking. She hurriedly extended the purple gold token in front of her a little. When the token emitted a light that was twice as bright as before, Yun Nuoxing and Yishi's bodies trembled. They shouted at the same time, now. Then, the former quickly chanted Amitabha in her heart. The latter used all her strength to wave the Linghong sword and violently swept it across the space tunnel. Boom! A white energy sword radiance formed a circle and rapidly swept out from Ling Hongjian's body. After which, it slashed on the surrounding space barrier. An earth-shattering roar resounded through the passageway. The barrier formed by the space passageway seemed to shake violently for a moment, after which, cracks began to spread rapidly. In less than a moment, a clear explosion resounded. Bang! The space barrier shattered. Endless silver spatial energy wreaked havoc and swept towards Yun Nuoxing and the others. The vast energy wave covered the sky and covered the earth as it rushed towards Yun Nuoxing and the others, pressing their robes tightly against their bodies. Go! Yun Nuoxing sucked in a breath of cold air after being shocked by the huge energy wave. However, she couldn't care less at this moment. She hugged Yu Yin and the others and hurriedly pulled Yishi over. Then, they charged towards the rapidly approaching space storm. Purple flames surged out from every inch of their bodies and turned into a flaming arrow. With Yun Nuoxing and the others as the arrowhead, they charged madly towards the storm. The dense spatial energy collided with the arrowhead. However, before it could touch the arrowhead, it was completely refined by the purple flames. A wide crack was torn in the huge space storm by the arrow condensed from the divine flames. Then, it scuttled into the silver spatial crack behind the storm and disappeared. In the silver space tunnel, violent spatial turbulence filled the entire space. The silver ball of light kept moving forward in front of the tunnel. They didn't know where it ended. Chapter 192. Ah! When he opened his eyes again, Yun Nuoxing let out a painful groan. The first thing that entered his eyes was a snow-white ceiling. It seemed like he was in a room. The room was filled with a faint fragrance of incense that made his mind calm down. Stepping onto the soft bed, Yun Nuoxing looked around the exquisitely decorated room in a daze. The glaring sunlight shone on his pale face from the side, causing him to frown and turn his head. The bright sunlight shone through the open window at the side. Outside the window, the snow-white clouds were retreating rapidly. Ouch, 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 ouch. Yun Nuoxing looked at the strong sunlight with a pained expression. He struggled to sit up, and his snow-white hair was pulled up from the bed. His light purple hair had already lost its gorgeous color. He held his head with one hand. His mind and body were in intense pain, as if they were being torn apart. There were also waves of pain coming from the inside of his body. He knew that this was a sign of serious injury. He lowered his head to look at his clothes. The black windbreaker and black robe that he always wore were gone. In their place was a gray linen shirt. A few bandages could be seen around his chest, and there were mottled bloodstains on the bandages. Yun Nuoshing touched the bandages around his chest in a daze, only to realize that there were many bandages around his arms that were stained with bloodstains. He blinked his eyes hard. He remembered that when he charged into the silver crack, he didn't leave from the same place as he had imagined. Instead, he fell into the void and was ravaged by the spatial turbulence everywhere. In order to protect the few of them, he seemed to have broken his 6 wings. In the end, Yi Shi had to wave her Ling Hong sword twice to escape from the void. If it weren't for the purple night flame and the various divine weapons, the 5 of them might have been torn apart by the chaotic spatial energy Ming, Zi Hun, Xiao Shi, Sister Yuan. Yun Nuoshing was stunned for a moment, but he quickly reacted and hurriedly called out. He only remembered that Yi Shi had cut open the void, but he didn't remember what happened after that. He didn't see the others now. Where did they go? Have they come out yet? His gaze swept over the strand of hair in his hand, and he was stunned for a moment. His eyes quickly turned to the bed beside him, and he saw Ming, who had beautiful purplish-black hair, sleeping soundly. Her breathing was calm, and her small face was calm, as if nothing had happened. Ming! Yun Nuoshing heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that she was sleeping soundly with no injuries on her body. However, she didn't see the other 3 figures when she scanned the room. There's no need to look for them. Those 2 were thrown off when they were about to leave the void. If you didn't catch them, Yi Shi will be in trouble. Just as Yun Nuoshing was feeling anxious because she didn't see the 2 of them, Ziye's voice slowly rang out in her mind. Moreover, that faintly discernible voice seemed to be a little weak. Zai, you? What happened to you? Yun Nuoshing was stunned when she heard the weakness in Ziye's voice. She quickly asked and then laughed bitterly. This damned spatial tunnel. She only took 1 trip and she was injured all over. She definitely wouldn't use it again in the future. I'm fine. Our minds are connected. You're weak, so I'm a little weak too. Ziyi sighed faintly and said, when you left the void and fell from the sky, you were rescued by a spaceship. You're on the ship now. You've been unconscious for 7 days. I want to help you heal your injuries, but I don't have enough energy, so there's nothing I can do. A flying ship? Yun Nuoshing looked at the white clouds floating outside the window when she heard that. Flying ships, as the name implied, flew in the sky. It was a unique means of transportation in the Divine Continent. The original design idea was that rare and exotic beasts were hard to find, and those who needed to travel long distances needed a means of transportation to save themselves from exhaustion. Therefore, flying ships were created. High-grade flying ships could even exceed the speed of light at the highest speed. However, looking at the scenery outside the window, it didn't seem to be flying at its highest speed. It was flying leisurely. Ming. Yun Nuoshing gently caressed Ming's face and called out softly. However, the latter wrinkled his little nose, turned around, and continued to sleep. He had no intention of waking up at all. Where's Yi Shi? You said that she's a little troublesome. Troublesome means. She suddenly thought of what Ziyi had just said, and her heart, which had not yet calmed down, suddenly jumped up a lot. A faint sigh suddenly sounded in her heart, causing Yun Nuoshing's heart to sink. Don't worry. Yi Shi also came out. However, she used the Linghong sword in order to break through the void and suffered a backlash. Ziyi hurriedly said when he sensed the sorrow in her heart. Hearing that, Yun Nuoshing heaved a sigh of relief. It was just a backlash caused by the Linghong sword. She would be fine after some recuperation. Yi Shi also cultivated the soul-burning technique, so some damage to her soul would not be very serious. She's not the owner of the divine weapon, nor did she borrow the power of the owner of the divine weapon. She used the divine weapon on her own accord. Do you think the backlash from that broken Linghong sword will be any better? Ziyi said indifferently just as Yun Nuoshing was feeling a little relieved. What do you mean? Yun Nuoshing hurriedly asked when she heard that something was wrong. A divine weapon is different from a divine weapon. Once it recognizes its owner, it can still be lent to others. Once a divine weapon recognizes its owner, it will be difficult for it to unleash its power unless the owner is dead. Even if the owner forcibly uses the power of the divine weapon, they will also suffer a terrifying backlash. If it's lent to others, that person's energy will also be needed as a guide. Ziyi sighed. There's my energy in the Linghong sword. How? Yun Nuoshing was a little anxious when she heard that. When she passed the Linghong sword to Yi Shi, she did have her own energy in it. However, your energy was depleted after the first swing. When you fell into the void, the second and third swings were her own energy. I don't think I need to say much about the consequences. You'll know once you enter your soul, Ziyi said with a sigh. Soul? Hearing that, Yun Nuoshing did not ask any more questions. She hurriedly lay down and entered her soul. After entering her soul, Yun Nuoshing was shocked. The originally pitch-black soul space was now filled with a sea of fire. The light purple fire lit up the space, but it did not make her feel hot at all. She only felt a little warm. Ignoring the changes in her soul space, Yun Nuoshing hurriedly raised her head and saw the silver god's imprint. Behind the imprint there was a beautiful egg that was half pink and half black. It was quietly floating there. Beside it there was a cocoon of light that was about 10 feet in size that attracted her attention. This is... Yun Nuoshing frowned. He was 100% sure that there was no such thing in his soul before. The cocoon formed by Yi Shi's soul. A pleasant but weak voice came from beside him. Yun Nuoshing turned her head and saw Ziyi slowly walking over from the sea of fire in the distance. Her purple robes covered her delicate body and made her look slender. However, her beautiful face was a little pale. After stealing a few glances, Yun Nuoshing hurriedly turned her head and muttered with uncertainty, "Formed by Yi Shi? Fortunately, you let her cultivate the burning soul technique. Her soul was severely injured, and she turned into a cocoon. This is the final defense of the burning soul technique. The backlash from the divine weapon is not as simple as you think. If not for the burning soul technique, her soul would have been destroyed." Yun Nuoshing was silent for a while. After a while, she sighed heavily and looked at Ziyi. She said, "When will little she wake up?" "I don't know. When her soul recovers, when will she wake up?" Ziyi shook her head and looked at the silver god's imprint. She then comforted, "Don't worry. With the god's imprint and the burning soul technique, nothing will happen to Yi Shi. If you are worried, you should recover quickly and use your spiritual energy to nourish this cocoon. Who knows, she might recover faster." Seeing her smile softly, Yun Nuoshing also squeezed out a forced smile. He gently patted the cocoon and let out a long sigh. Opening her eyes, Yun Nuoshing sat up and scratched her head. She touched the 2 rings and 2 pendants that were still there, and let out a sigh of relief. She took out a black windbreaker and casually put it on. Then, she took out 2 elixirs for internal injuries and popped them into her mouth. With the 5 elements in her body and the purple night flame, it was only a matter of time before she recovered. She sat cross-legged on the bed and took out an 8-colored crystal the size of a fingernail. Her spiritual energy drilled out from between her eyebrows and formed a crude heaven-refining array around Yun Nuoshing. Because it was only used to condense energy, there was no need to draw it out completely. The effect was greater than simply activating an energy-condensing array. She threw the crystal into the center of the array, and the array began to operate gently. A thick energy mist floated in the array space and poured into Yun Nuoshing's body continuously, repairing her body that had reached its limit. The 5 elements in her body carried 2 flames as they traveled through her body. Along the way, they repaired some broken meridians. The external injuries on the surface of her body were also healing at an observable speed. In less than an hour, the array dissipated and the energy of the crystal in the center of the array was completely absorbed by Yun Nuashing. It turned into ashes and drifted in the air. Phew! The array dissipated and Yun Nuashing let out a long sigh of relief. The paleness on her handsome face had already been replaced by a rosy complexion. Her silver-white hair had also returned to its light purple color. Her entire body was filled with energy and her injuries had already healed. The 5 elements and the divine flame allowed her to recover at an extremely fast speed. The effect was definitely not inferior to some high-grade elixirs. However, Yun Nuashing was still not used to being injured. Every time she healed, she would feel an unforgettable pain. She had the light element in her body, so not everything could hurt her. She stretched her waist and removed all the bandages on her body. Her line of sight inadvertently glanced at her 2 arms. Then, she was stunned on her 2 arms. There was a mysterious pattern that was connected from end to end. It extended from her shoulders all the way to her forearms. 9 different colors of light flowed slowly and seemed to connect everything together. On her right forearm, the pattern of the Netherworld Ruin Sword and Ling Hong Sword that originally existed had already disappeared. It had transformed into a large, colorful imprint that almost covered her entire forearm. She could even vaguely see the 2 divine weapons. There was even a tiny colorful line that extended all the way to her middle finger. This, what the hell is this? Yun Nuashing widened her eyes and stared fixedly at that line. Her voice was a little shocked as she shouted at the top of her lungs. This is the imprint left behind by the divine weapons that you took out and merged into your body. It has been integrated into your body by your physique. Don't be so shocked. This is the imprint left behind by the cultivation method of the spiritual divine physique. It is constantly accommodating and from the looks of it, there seems to be some progress. It is said that the complete spiritual divine physique will be covered in colorful patterns. Moreover, the best, or rather, the most common cultivation method of the spiritual divine physique is to accommodate a bunch of spiritual high-level weapons. Your entire body is like a moving arsenal. Hearing her frightened shout, Ziyi explained nonchalantly. As Yun Nuashing recovered, her voice was no longer weak. It was still that kind of clear voice that was like a wind chime that warmed one's heart. Yun Nuashing was dumbfounded. She didn't know what to say at all. Could it be that those divine weapons had entered her body so casually without her consent? Was the divine physique too domineering, or were the divine weapons too casual? But it looks pretty good. Yun Nuashing shook her head with a smile as she turned her arm around to admire it. Shameless. Ziyi couldn't help but mutter when he heard Yun Nuashing's narcissistic voice. You're very beautiful too, okay? Yun Nuashing pursed her lips and looked at the light purple flame imprint on her chest. It was now like a seed that had sprouted a tender shoot. However, it was growing on 2 ends, one up and the other down, of course. In the end, Ziyi laughed proudly in Yun Nuashing's heart. Like a wind chime, it made a pleasant tinkling sound. Yun Nuashing. He glanced at Ming and hesitated for a moment before carrying her. In this unfamiliar place, Yun Nuashing couldn't feel at ease leaving her here alone. After tidying up the bed, Yun Nuashing carried Ming to the door, gently pushed it open, and walked out. Yun Nuashing secretly peeked half his head out. He didn't see dozens of people forming hand seals as soon as the door opened as he expected. He slowly relaxed. Then, he laughed bitterly. Why are you so nervous? There was a curved corridor outside the room. There were many other rooms in other places. It seemed to be an area similar to a residential area. He looked at the 2 passageways on his left and right, then lifted his feet and walked toward the left. His footsteps made clanging sounds as he stepped on the floor that seemed to be made of metal. After walking for about 5 minutes, Yun Nuashing saw an exit. Sunlight shone in from the entrance. When he saw this, his footsteps quickened, and his primary energy began to circulate crazily again. When he walked out of the door, the dazzling sunlight shone down from the sky and landed on Yun Nuoxing's body without any obstructions. He closed his eyes out of habit. After a while, he finally adapted to the intensity of the sunlight and slowly opened his eyes. He looked around and lowered his gaze a little. He couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Wow! What entered his line of sight was a wide and spacious platform. It was like a flat and smooth metal plate that extended out. It was at least 1,000 meters long and a few hundred meters wide. The entire platform was made of a white flat plate, and the front of the deck formed an arc that looked like a white longsword. There were vertical baffles at the edge. At this moment, many people were lying on the baffles, talking and laughing. From Yun Nuoxing's angle, he could see everything below. Yun Nuoxing was also on a small platform. There were stairs on both sides that surrounded a building that looked like an iron tower behind him. It was also made of white metal. There was still a long way to go, but no one walked to the back. Most of them were gathered on the deck in front of the ship. It's so big! Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but exclaim. The entire ship was more than 2,000 meters long. It was like a small moving fortress, but it didn't look strict. There weren't many guards holding spears. It looked happy and harmonious, and the surrounding atmosphere was very relaxed and cheerful. This ship is heading towards the northeast, Qin Wentian said. Yun Nuoxing looked up at the sun hanging high in the sky and murmured, I don't know where I am now. Have I reached the so-called Xingyu city? Where are my sister and the others? While Yun Nuoxing was murmuring, someone finally noticed him. There were some noises on the deck, and many people quickly walked towards him. Hearing the cries of some people, Yun Nuoxing also retracted his gaze and jumped down from the 100-meter high platform first. Then, amidst the surprised cries of the crowd, he landed lightly and stopped in front of the crowd. He smiled and cupped his hands. Thank you for saving us. Everyone looked at him strangely, then smiled. A middle-aged man wearing a purple robe walked out of the crowd and sized him up. Then, he smiled and said, Not bad, little brother. Your injuries have healed so quickly. You can jump now. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly and shook his head. It had already been 7 days, how could it be fast? However, if this thought was known by others, they might not be able to help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Such a serious injury was healed in 7 days, what was there to be dissatisfied about? Did he eat a huge amount of pills? We are the fleet of the Xian family in Xingyu City. When we passed by here, we saw you falling from the sky, so we gave you a hand. If you fell straight down like this, I'm afraid you would be smashed into meat paste. Thank you for saving us. Yun Nuoxing smiled, cupped his hands, and said. However, some thoughts were swirling in his mind. Xian family? It can't be that Xian family, right? Thinking until here, he shook his head. In this world, the realm of the gods was so vast. There were at least tens of thousands of families with the surname Xian. It might not be the same family. Xingyu City, it should be the Xingyu City that person mentioned. I didn't expect that after breaking free from the spatial tunnel, it didn't deviate too much. My name is Xian Fu, I'm a deacon of the Xian family. This time, I'm leading the Xian family's fleet to do business. Now I'm on the way back. After saving you, I didn't help much. There are no doctors or alchemists on the fleet. I could only help you treat your injuries. The middle-aged man named Xian Fu scratched his head and smiled. Thank you, big brother Xian Fu. I'm Yun Nuoxing. Yun Nuoxing smiled and thanked him again. Then, he said, I wonder if big brother Xian Fu saw the red-clothed girl who fell down with me? No. At that time, there were only the two of you in the sky. No one else was there. Hearing that, Xian Fu immediately shook his head. At that time, it was daytime. There were no clouds in the sky. It was impossible to miss anything. Hearing this answer, even though Yun Nuoxing was prepared, he couldn't help but sigh. Sister Yuan, little Z, where did you go? Chapter 193. Little brother, are you alright? Are your injuries still not healed? Xian Fu couldn't help but ask when he saw Yun Nuoxing's sad expression. I'm fine. Yun Nuoxing shook his head and looked up at the sky. He let out a long sigh and hesitated for a while before asking, where did I fall from that day? Little brother, 7 days have already passed. No matter what you want to find, there won't be anything left behind. Why don't you tell us what happened first and see if we can help? Xian Fu said calmly as he patted his shoulder. Hearing that, Yun Nuoxing nodded his head. He took a deep breath and slowly explained what happened. You actually escaped from the spatial tunnel? Xian Fu's face was filled with shock. He couldn't help but shake his head and say, no wonder your injuries are so serious. The backlash of spatial energy isn't that good. You're lucky to be able to escape from that thing. Once, when a fleet of our Xian family used the tunnel, they also disappeared without a trace. We don't know where they went. Let's go back to Star Universe City first. Since you're heading in that direction, maybe your friend has already been teleported there. Xian Fu smiled and comforted Yun Nuoxing as he patted his shoulder. I hope so. Yun Nuoxing nodded his head. His heart slowly calmed down. Right now, this was the only way. He wasn't familiar with this place. If he rushed out rashly, he might not be able to find his way. Since Xian Fu came from Star Universe City, then he could follow him to Star Universe City. Seeing that he agreed, Xian Fu said, the fleet will probably reach Star Universe City in half a month. During this time, stay on the ship. You can stroll around as you wish. But remember, don't go to the building in the center. Nodding his head again, Yun Nuoxing smiled. He didn't think about strolling around. Right now, he didn't have the mood. Moreover, he was about to reach his destination. He wanted to break through to the immortal realm before he landed. If Star Universe City was the center of Taiyuan region, then the Divine Continent was the center of the God realm. This was the gathering place of many experts. All the major forces were rooted here. Thousands of races stood in great numbers. Walking in this place, if one's strength wasn't enough, there would be some trouble. Although Yun Nuoxing's trump card was enough to let him run amok in the Divine Continent, his strength was still a little weak. It's said that as long as one's strength was strong enough, you're strong. But no matter who saw a person who was full of divine tools, they would feel a little uncomfortable. In the end, one's own strength was the most important thing. Thinking of this, Yun Nuoxing smiled. He greeted Xian Fu and said something. Then, he jumped onto the platform and went back to his room. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath. His soul power gushed out from between his eyebrows. Along with the purple night flame, he condensed a layer of soul barrier in the room. As long as the soul power didn't exceed his, they wouldn't be able to perceive everything that happened here. Carefully putting Ming on the bed and covering him with a quilt, he formed a few hand seals with both hands and constructed the heaven-refining great formation. His finger lightly touched the pendant. He couldn't help but frown. With a flash of light, a head-sized fire pearl and a fist-sized saint-grade mysterious crystal floated in front of him. Looking at the familiar fire pearl, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but smile bitterly. He found it at the place where he found the phoenix egg. It contained a lot of pure fire element energy. Originally, he gave it to Yuan. Looking at it now, she seemed to have given it to him when he wasn't paying attention. His palm gently caressed the fire bead, and the scorching energy flowed into his body through his palm. The fire element in his body let out an incomparably excited and yearning sound. Feeling this energy, Yun Nuoxing missed his heartless sister who always treated him like a child, even though they had only been separated for less than half a month. I always feel it's very quiet. Letting out a long sigh, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but murmur. Half a month ago, there were still a few people beside him, chattering nonstop. It made him forget the faintly discernible feeling of vicissitudes of life. But now, Yin and Little Purple Soul were gone. Yishi's soul was badly injured and dormant. Little Ming was also in a coma. He was left alone in a daze. The palm that was grinding the fire bead paused. On the smooth bead, Yun Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. He turned the fire bead over, only to discover that there were a few words carved on it. He looked at it with interest, and then, his face instantly twitched violently. "If you don't refine the fire pearl, I will pluck you down from the sky." Yun Nuoxing shook his head with a bitter smile. This was what she wanted to do. She wanted to pluck him down from the sky all day long. But he had always been curious. What did pluck him down from the sky mean? "Fine, I'll refine it. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Yun Nuoxing muttered helplessly. This fire pearl contained a very rich fire element energy. The fire element in his body had reached the purest stage because he had refined the purple night flame. If he refined it now, the effect would be maximized. It wouldn't be a problem for him to break through to the half-immortal stage. The problem was whether he could break through to the immortal stage. "Ziyi, you said that there won't be any repercussions for me to break through to the half-immortal stage by refining the glazed crystal, right?" Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but ask while he was thinking. "That's right. The spiritual godly physique is universal. Other physiques that also rely on energy can also use this method." Ziyi nodded when he heard Yun Nuoxing's voice. Then, he added, "Also, there's no need to doubt anything. If I say you have the spiritual godly physique, then you have the spiritual godly physique. In the current realm of the gods, only some super old monsters know about this physique. Others might not be able to recognize it." Yun Nuoxing rubbed his face with a bitter smile. He had been living a strange life for the past few years. He didn't even know who he was. The mortal stage is the half-immortal stage. There are 9 transformations in the half-immortal stage. You have to compress your energy 9 times before you can break through to the immortal stage. Yun Nuoxing collected her thoughts and calculated in her mind. Then, she frowned and looked at the fire pearl floating in front of her. She said, "What about this fire pearl? Can I use it too?" "Yes, yes, yes. As long as it's pure energy, it's fine. This fire pearl is condensed from the energy leaked out from the saint-grade mysterious crystal. The energy of the fire element is more than that of the saint-grade mysterious crystal. In other words, refining this fire pearl will be more beneficial to you." Ziyi yawned and answered lazily. Taking a deep breath, Yun Nuoxing threw away the distracting thoughts in her mind. Then, she slapped the fire pearl into the eye of the heaven refining formation. She changed her hand seal and dozens of energy matrices gushed out and wrapped around the fire pearl. They extracted rich fire element energy and then transmitted it to every part of the formation through the energy matrices. The entire formation was dyed a fiery red. The blazing energy seeped out and spun in the air, automatically absorbing the surrounding fire element energy. Then, it entered Yun Nuoxing's body. It passed through the purple night flame that enveloped her body and refined it. Then, it was refined by the soul-burning technique in her body. The energy that was as thick as a thigh suddenly became as thin as a pinky finger. Finally, it turned into surging origin energy and spread throughout the crystals in her limbs and bones. "Compress the energy harder. You have to compress it to the same degree as the energy in your body," Ziyi said calmly. Yun Nuoxing nodded solemnly. The origin energy container in her lower abdomen had already been condensed into a crystal. The energy that was released was also energy that had been compressed to the extreme. The new energy also had to be compressed and refined layer by layer until it reached the same state before it could be absorbed. As a result, the amount of energy required was an astronomical figure. The energy flowing in the crystal had been compressed countless times before it obtained such a color. It was red from the fire element, blue from the water element, and golden from the light element. However, Yun Nuoxing wasn't worried about the lack of energy at all. Not to mention that the heaven refining formation could absorb the energy of heaven and earth within a certain range. Just the energy contained in the fire pearl was enough to support Yun Nuoxing's cultivation. The half-immortal stage requires the origin energy in the body to gradually transform into immortal qi. Only when all of the origin energy is replaced by immortal qi can one be considered to have advanced into the immortal stage. Two different types of energy, but formed from the same source of energy. But to what extent do I have to compress it? Not long after, the entire formation was covered by a dense, fiery red energy mist. Yun Nuoxing's figure was also submerged in the mist. A whirlpool could be seen spinning rapidly in the formation, condensing the surrounding energy mist into liquid. Like streams of water, the liquid quickly flowed towards the source of the whirlpool, Yun Nuoxing. The liquid entered through every pore of her body and was refined into pure origin energy, which gathered in her lower abdomen. The energy gathered in her lower abdomen wasn't in a hurry to fuse with the crystal. On the contrary, more energy continuously flowed out of the crystal and intertwined with the new energy. Then, it was compressed and condensed by her majestic soul energy. Under the powerful compression, the two types of energy emitted waves of energy. The volume of the two types of energy also became smaller and smaller, as if they were about to become solid. Drain the energy in the container and temper it. Then, put the newly compressed energy, immortal qi, into the container. Ziyi was also guiding Yun Nuoxing's cultivation from the side. The heaven and earth energies from the outside world were also mixed with the numerous elemental energies that were drifting about and were pouring into the formation. However, when they just approached the hull of the ship, these energies without exception disappeared without a trace. Only in the boundary world could these energies be observed. One after another, the energies converged into a huge energy light beam that broke into the formation that enveloped the entire room. Ordinary energy of heaven and earth entering the formation was nothing. However, when the elemental energies entered the formation, the mottled colors were uniformly transformed into fiery red fire elemental energies. Then, they emerged from the formation and were refined by Yun Nuoxing. Under such an orderly situation, the energy in Yun Nuoxing's body was slowly increasing. The crystal in her lower abdomen was also slowly growing bigger. Moreover, it seemed to be gradually becoming rounder. The 8 corners of the cube were actually slowly being worn away. When the crystal turned into a perfectly round bead, she reckoned that she would be able to advance to the immortal rank. A ball, huh? Interesting measurement method. Yun Nuoxing, who sensed the changes, laughed. The measurement of the levels in the ranks wasn't very clear. Unless she went through it step by step, or she could see it when she released her aura, she wouldn't be able to sense it. However, the changes in the ranks were observable to a certain extent. Every time she advanced to the next rank, the energy contained in her body would change. Apart from this, she could also see the changes in the container. After carefully sizing it up and seeing that there was nothing wrong with it, Yun Nuoxing slowly closed her eyes and continued to absorb the huge amount of energy. It would take some time for her to advance from the 11th level of the mortal rank to the half-immortal rank, then to the immortal rank, even if she used the 5 elements to increase her speed. She had to try her best to finish it within half a month. After cultivating in such an orderly manner for a few days, Yun Nuoxing unexpectedly discovered that the head-sized fire bead hadn't changed at all. It was still the same size and it was still very bright. It was as if it wasn't the one supplying the energy all this time. However, the energy flowing out of the formation was indeed extracted from it. After being surprised for a while, Yun Nuoxing turned her attention to her lower abdomen. There, a bright-colored bead was surrounded by a fiery red pool of energy. The bead was constantly extracting the energy from the pool to strengthen itself. Within the fiery red energy, there was a bit of illusory energy that was completely different from the energy from before. However, with Yun Nuoxing's refining speed, this was still too slow. The energy wasn't abundant enough, and as she refined it, it broke off. The speed at which the 5 elements are added together is too fast. With a thought, a vast amount of soul power wrapped around the pool of water. The majestic strength compressed the pool of water, turning it into a whirlpool and pushing it into the round bead. Looking at the energy that was quickly condensing at the side, Yun Nuoshing sighed. Although the energy that was stripped from the fire bead was already very large, the energy was still not enough. Yun Nuoshing glanced to the side and saw the black rhombus crystal that was constantly emitting a faint purple energy. Yun Nuoshing's eyes turned, but before he could do anything, the seal on the surface of the rhombus crystal actually cracked a little. Instantly, the energy that was several times larger than before rushed towards the rapidly condensing energy like an ocean. The vast soul power was actually shaken by the sudden appearance of this energy. Yun Nuoshing was stunned. After a moment, she reacted and shrugged her shoulders. She thanked Ziyi in her heart. He knew that this was Ziyi's masterpiece. At this moment, the faint purple energy and the fiery red energy intertwined and rapidly condensed beside the bead. The mass of energy was also growing larger and larger. He couldn't divert his attention to other things. He hurriedly released all of his soul power, carrying the 5 elements, and threw it into the refinement process. The vast amount of energy that was as vast as the ocean howled in his body. It even formed an energy storm that swept through the entire room. The storm lasted for a moment. Suddenly, dozens of silk threads extended from Yun Nuoshing's skin and stuck to every corner of the room. Dazzling light was released. More and more silk threads surged out and wrapped around Yun Nuoshing and the heaven refining array. Silk threads kept entangling them and slowly formed a cocoon. Flickering lights flickered in the cocoon like a heartbeat. With the formation of the cocoon, the energy storm also disappeared. The entire room was left with a huge cocoon of light and Ming, who was sleeping soundly. Chapter 194. The snow-white room was filled with bright mottled energy, forming a small whirlpool. Energy whistled and surged, and through the layers of dense energy mist, one could see a large cocoon of light hanging in the middle of the room. The dazzling light flickered like a beating heart. Every time the light flickered, the surrounding energy would fluctuate, and then a large portion of the energy would flow into the cocoon of light. During the time that Yun Nuoshing was in seclusion, Xian Fu and the others only came by once. However, they only stood at the door for a moment. When they felt the powerful energy reverberating through the door, even though he was an immortal rank expert, he couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Thus, he stopped everyone from investigating. The most taboo thing for cultivators was to be disturbed. If they were disturbed, their state of mind would become unstable, and their efforts would be for naught. But if the energy went berserk when he thought of this, Xian Fu couldn't help but wipe his forehead. If the energy in the room went berserk, it would be enough to blow up the entire ship. Since no one came to disturb them, Yun Nuoshing's advancement naturally progressed smoothly. The energy in the room gradually retracted, and was locked in the room by the formation under the cocoon of light. Everything flowed back into the room, and the cocoon of light was immersed in a sea of energy. If anyone could see the cocoon of light, they would discover that it was nurturing an extremely powerful life form. During this time, Ming woke up. She was shocked when she saw the cocoon of light hanging in the air. However, when she sensed Yun Nuoshing's presence, she calmed down. She had seen Yun Nuoshing transform into a cocoon before, so there was nothing to be surprised about. However, when she swept her small eyes around and didn't see Yuan, Yi Shi, or Little Purple Soul, she was a little anxious. This was the first time she had been left alone like this. It felt as if she had been abandoned. She felt so wrong that she wanted to cry. A thin layer of mist actually appeared in her watery eyes, as if sensing Ming's emotions. The cocoon of light suddenly became much brighter. A powerful suction force suddenly erupted from the cocoon of light, crazily plundering the energy in this area. It even formed a huge energy whirlpool in the room. At this time, there was no barrier set up by a divine artifact in the room, and the soul barrier had inadvertently dispersed when Yun Nuashing transformed into a cocoon. This caused the whirlpool to clearly expand, forming a multicolored energy whirlpool outside the ship. A strange pressure spread out, causing the hearts of the people on the deck to abruptly contract. What a powerful pressure! This energy seems to be almost at the immortal rank. On the deck, Xian Fu couldn't help but gulp when he saw the energy whirlpool formed halfway up the building. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead and back. Only a few people in the Xian family possessed such a powerful pressure. Everyone, do not take half a step into the residential area. Stay on the deck for this period of time. After pausing for a moment, Xian Fu quickly reacted and shouted loudly. His voice spread out majestically. A 16 or 17-year-old immortal rank expert? Thinking of Yun Nuashing's young appearance, Xian Fu couldn't help but smile bitterly. If the former really broke through to the immortal rank, then even the Xian family, one of the major forces in Star Universe City, would have to consider making friends with him. An immortal rank cultivator was already considered an expert. It wasn't that Star Universe City didn't have immortal rank experts, but he had never seen one so young. The self-proclaimed strongest youth was only a half-immortal rank 7 or 8, and that person was already over 20 years old. At this moment, seeing a youth who looked no more than 16 or 17 years old breaking through to the immortal rank, he couldn't help but wipe his sweat. Such terrifying talent was simply heaven-defying. At this rate of development, maybe after 10,000 years, a god whose name would shake the entire divine continent will be born. If they were on good terms with him, the Xian family would definitely obtain unimaginable benefits. In just a short moment, Xian Fu had already thought through the pros and cons of this. With this kind of brain, it would be a waste if he didn't go into business in the room. Feeling the sudden surge of energy around him, Ming seemed to have guessed that Yun Nuashing wanted to desperately break through to the immortal rank. But if he was impatient and acted recklessly like this, he might suffer from qi deviation. Big brother, don't worry, Ming is fine. Shocked by Yun Nuashing's actions, Ming hurriedly got up, tiptoed, and used his small hand to touch the light cocoon as he hurriedly said. Upon hearing Ming's voice, the light cocoon stopped its frantic absorption of energy. However, it continued to radiate an extremely dazzling radiance. Not only did the whirlpool outside not dissipate, but it also expanded significantly. Vast amounts of soul power dominated the energy in this area, continuously extracting the various elemental energies drifting between heaven and earth. Seeing that the light cocoon had settled down, Ming also heaved a sigh of relief. His small body curled up in the bed, and he didn't dare to do anything else lest he disturb Yun Nuashing. After settling down, Yun Nuashing also sped up his breakthrough. He felt that in this unfamiliar place, he naturally had some confidence in breaking through to the immortal rank. Not to mention that he had more than 10 divine tools on him, just the light cocoon he formed was enough to defend himself. After going through a few heavenly tribulations, Yun Nuashing also understood a little. This light cocoon seemed to be able to absorb destructive energy, so naturally, he wasn't afraid of being interrupted by people with bad intentions. But I really didn't choose a good place to break through. In the soul world, Yun Nuashing scratched his head in distress. He was indeed too anxious this time, directly breaking through without choosing a place. But he was already halfway through, so he couldn't just stop now, right? Who told you to be so impatient? Don't you know that haste makes waste? In front of Yun Nuashing, a beautiful girl with an oval face sat quietly. Her light purple hair hung down straight like silk, and her body was surrounded by gorgeous purple flames. A few faint lines of fire connected her and Yun Nuashing. This was naturally Ziyi. She seemed to have been staying in Yun Nuoxing's soul all this time, and didn't really come out even after being refined. After being taught a lesson, Yun Nuoxing only smiled bitterly. Between his palms, purple flames and blue flames intertwined. However, if one had to describe it, it was more like the purple flames were eating the blue flames. After all, the blue flames were only a small ball, and the purple flames were faintly dyed with a faint blue color. It wandered in the purple flames, as if the two types of flames had merged together. Be careful, calm your mind. Don't be agitated anymore. It'll be fun if the flames explode. Right now, we're in your soul world. At the very least, you'll be seriously injured. Ziyi yawned, covered her small mouth with her delicate hand, and said lazily. She didn't know why this guy suddenly went crazy and suggested to merge the flames. Did he really think that he could do whatever he wanted just because he had the spiritual divine body? Fortunately, this was only the merging of ordinary flames and divine flames. The former would be firmly suppressed, so there wouldn't be any accidents during the merging process. If it was the merging of two divine flames, let's see how you'll die. Yes. Yun Nuoxing curled his lips and nodded in response. His mind was focused on the flames on his palms. Looking at the two balls of flames fusing together, he couldn't help but laugh. Relying on the unique effects of the soul-burning formula and the spiritual divine body, he actually managed to merge the two types of flames that had repelled each other. However, the blue flames were clearly too weak. It was said to be merging, but in fact, it was almost completely devoured by the purple flames. Moreover, the purple flames only had a tiny bit of blue color. However, although the blue flames were very weak, Yun Nuoxing could still feel that the power of the purple flames seemed to have increased by a lot. I wonder what will happen when the two types of divine flames merge together. Licking his lips, this thought suddenly flashed across Yun Nuoxing's mind. Then, he couldn't get rid of it no matter how hard he tried. He couldn't get rid of it and seemed to stubbornly want to give it a try. Pfft. Hearing this, Ziyi instantly lost his composure and spat out a mouthful of water. His eyes widened as he stared at Yun Nuoxing. That kind of expression was as if he was looking at a lunatic. After being stunned for a long time, he said, "Are you crazy?" "I'm just saying. Don't be so agitated." Yun Nuoxing stuck out her tongue and laughed. However, this thought was rooted in the bottom of his heart. Ziyi, who was connected to his mind, naturally felt it too. "Don't be rash." Ziyi glanced at him and said indifferently. In his heart, he wasn't too surprised. He was just a little shocked, as if he already knew that Ziyi would do this. "Don't worry." Yun Nuoxing shrugged and grinned. He was looking forward to the power of the two types of divine flames after they merged. Burning mountains and boiling seas should be very easy, right? Seeing that Ziyi did not have much of an emotional fluctuation, Yun Nuoxing tilted his head, and then continued to throw his mind into the two balls of flames in his hands. The fusion here was not complete yet. If his mind fluctuated a little and messed it up, then his fate would be somewhat miserable. When Yun Nuoxing's merging of the flames was going smoothly, time quietly passed. The half-a-month journey seemed very short. Compared to Yun Nuoxing's journey, it was just a blink of an eye. During this half-a-month journey, the Xian family's flying ship increased its altitude by quite a bit. Because Yun Nuoxing's cultivation caused too much of a commotion, flying at a low altitude was very conspicuous. However, even if they flew a lot higher, it still attracted some people's attention. The energy fluctuation was very difficult to conceal. They didn't have anyone who could cast a spatial barrier or a mobility barrier. Along the way, when they passed by many small cities, there were experts who came up to investigate. There were even people who wanted to invite that big shot down for a chat. This made Xian Fu a little helpless. However, he politely sent them all back. At the same time, he got people to increase the speed of the ship. After leaving the city, they slowed down. After half a month's time, The flying ship also neared Star Universe City. Looking at the huge tower that stood in the sky, Xian Fu couldn't help but raise his head to look at the energy whirlpool that was still spinning. He was slightly anxious in his heart. Mr. Yun still hasn't finished his cultivation? We're about to reach Star Universe City. If we enter the city like this, it will inevitably cause some unnecessary trouble. It won't be good if other forces see us. Xian Fu scratched his head and couldn't help but mutter. The way he addressed Yun Nuoxing had unknowingly changed. The strong were easily respected. This sentence was really not wrong. After hesitating for a while, Xian Fu gritted his teeth and got people to slow down the ship. Then, he quickly walked towards the direction of the residential area, wanting to wake Yun Nuoxing up. Boom! Just after Xian Fu walked a few steps, a strange fluctuation suddenly came out from the room. Being affected by the fluctuation of energy, the originally clear sky suddenly darkened. A large patch of dark clouds inexplicably appeared on top of the ship and spread out in a manner that covered the sky. Silver-blue lightning flashed rapidly within it. A few bolts of lightning peeked out from the clouds and cut through the darkness. After that, the entire patch of dark clouds trembled a few times and began to appear gold, red, blue, green, and bright silver. When the last color appeared from the clouds and dyed the entire cloud into a six-colored thundercloud, a terrifying energy pressure suddenly reverberated from the heaven and earth. The rumbling sound made people mistakenly think that the entire space was trembling. This is heavenly tribulation? Xian Fu was the first to notice this situation. When he saw the colorful lightning bolts randomly flying around in the clouds, his mouth instantly dropped. In their experience, they had never seen such a thing as a heavenly tribulation. But today, even though they had seen it, that kind of energy was enough to split this ship into pieces. Just when Xian Fu didn't know what to do, a colorful cocoon of light suddenly rushed out from the residential area. The light it emitted wasn't any weaker than the colorful thundercloud in the sky. The cocoon of light only paused for a moment when it rushed out. Then, under the astonished gazes of Xian Fu and the others, it rushed out of the ship and quickly flew towards the mountain range in the distance. Along with it, the colorful thundercloud in the sky seemed to have followed the cocoon of light. Looking at the suddenly clear sky, Xian Fu and the others heaved a sigh of relief. That aura was too terrifying. Chapter 195. In a mountain range, a few roars of beasts could be heard from time to time. Warm sunlight poured down from the sky, and the leaves swayed with a crisp and pleasant sound. In just a moment, the might of thunder suddenly descended on this mountain range, causing the magical beasts that were dozing off below to suddenly raise their hairs. They looked up with eyes full of horror. A huge thundercloud had appeared in the sky at some point, covering the sky and the sun. Colorful lightning descended from the thundercloud and struck towards a certain place. The pressure that filled the sky frightened those magical beasts, and they quickly fled. They were taking a good afternoon nap. What was going on? Boom! 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 When the lightning that filled the sky fell from the sky, all of them turned and pointed at the light cocoon somewhere in the sky. From an outsider's point of view, it looked like a folded lightning bolt that struck the light cocoon in a flash. Some scarlet and dazzling talismans appeared on the surface of the colorful light cocoon, resisting all the destructive lightning bolts. Then, with a flash of light, purple flames with blazing heat wrapped around the lightning bolt, refining it and transmitting all the energy into the light cocoon. The power is too strong. Is it because I didn't experience the heavenly tribulation in the previous few realms? A somewhat puzzled voice suddenly came from the light cocoon that flickered with lightning. At the beginning, the light cocoon directly used the talismans, and the talismans contained in the soul-burning technique also rushed out on their own. It seemed to be a little difficult to resist. Boom! The light cocoon trembled violently, and purple flames swept out like a flaming storm, forming a tornado that connected the earth and the sky. The blazing heat burst out, causing the forest below to emit white smoke. Many trees were even ignited in an instant. The purple flames rose and covered the whole mountain range, as if they were going to burn this mountain range to ashes. The flaming tornado directly reached the thundercloud above and swept it in. Whether it was the thundercloud or the lightning, they were all mixed together. The purple tornado suddenly became gorgeous and colorful, and it faintly carried the crackling sound of thunder. Since the spiritual divine body can accommodate all living things, then I'll swallow this thundercloud. At the center of the tornado, Yun Nuoxing's sly laughter sounded from within the cocoon of light. Then, an enormous suction force suddenly erupted from the cocoon of light and sucked in the thunderclouds and lightning. If those experts who had experienced the heavenly tribulation saw this, they would definitely blush and curse. Motherf ****. Tribulation transcendence was such a dangerous thing. If one was careless and failed, it was not impossible for them to be seriously injured or even die. How could you be so reckless in your hands? Is it fun? The stirred thunderclouds seemed to be stunned for a moment. At some point, they actually quieted down. Then, in an instant, they suddenly erupted with an unusually powerful power. The lightning seemed to connect into an ocean, raging wildly in the flaming tornado, forming one after another lightning curtains that moved around the light cocoon. Boom! Kacha! Flames and lightning intertwined to create a crazy dance. Rhythmic crackling sounds rose and fell, like the rising and falling of the tide, like wave after wave, a roar that shook the soul resounded. And in this large decibel music, the sound of light cocoons shattering suddenly rang out, as if they could not withstand such a huge amount of energy, and began to shatter. Boom! After persistently striking for half an hour, the thunderclouds finally gave up on this tough bone that they could not chew on and slowly dissipated. The might of the lightning that filled the sky gradually dissipated, and even the tornado stopped. The forest below had long been destroyed beyond recognition. It was barren, and there was purple sand everywhere. Not a single tree was left. Kacha! The tornado dissipated, revealing a thin layer of light cocoon. Then, cracks began to appear on it. In just a short moment, the cracks had spread to the entire thin layer. Then, with a bang, it turned into light spots that filled the sky. The light cocoon shattered, revealing Yun Nuoxing, who was wearing a black windbreaker. His light purple hair was mixed with a strand of ocean blue hair that swayed with the wind. Warm sunlight poured down from the sky, and the golden light shone on Yun Nuoxing's body. His entire body seemed to be covered with a layer of golden gauze, appearing extremely beautiful, just like a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. Ugh! Yun Nuoxing stretched his arms and leaned back. He let out a low groan, and the bones in his body began to crackle, like the sound of beans being popped. Abundant energy flowed through his entire body. The overflowing energy turned into a thin mist that covered Yun Nuoxing. Immortal energy flowed through him, making him appear ethereal. Immortal energy. This meant that Yun Nuoxing had officially advanced to the immortal stage. The origin energy in his body had been completely converted into immortal energy. In his lower abdomen, the cube crystal that was originally the size of 2 fingers had completely turned into a round bead. However, it was only the size of a finger. Faint immortal energy lingered around it. Although its size had shrunk, the energy it contained was incomparable to before. Immortal energy and origin energy, the immortal stage versus the mortal stage. These were of a higher level of energy. How could they be compared? I've reached the immortal stage. However, if I always rely on external forces to break through, won't there be trouble in the future? Clenching his fist, Yun Nuoxing put away the fire bead that was floating in front of him. When he saw that it hadn't changed at all, and that the sentence was still engraved on it, he couldn't help but laugh. However, this shouldn't be completely relying on external forces, right? After all, it's condensed energy, so it shouldn't count as external forces. Moreover, the flow of energy in my body doesn't feel empty. There shouldn't be any problems. Sensing the situation in his body, the worry in his heart dissipated in less than a minute. I know that spiritual godly physiques are very reckless, but I didn't know that there was a spiritual godly physique as reckless as you. Just as Yun Nuoshing was feeling good about himself, Zai's voice sounded in his mind. There was a hint of anger in his voice, as if he was blaming him for his actions just now. All right, since there's nothing to do, let's not bother about the process, Yun Nuoshing said with a smile, as if he was a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water. If you act recklessly like this, something will happen sooner or later. Zai sighed. He knew that Yun Nuoshing was a stubborn person, so he didn't waste his breath to say anything. When Yun Nuoshing was in pain, he would naturally restrain himself. However, he still couldn't help but remind him. Then I'll be more careful next time. Yun Nuoshing scratched his head and smiled. It would be strange if you were more careful, Zai muttered in his heart. He didn't say anything on the surface and only softly said, "N." After replying to Zai half-heartedly and half-seriously, Yun Nuoshing looked into the distance. 6 wings spread out from his back, and he quickly flew in the direction he came from. It had been a while since he came out. If he stayed for too long, he would think that he had been thrown away. Therefore, when he flew, he even used the light element. After Yun Nuoshing advanced to the immortal rank, his body's energy capacity increased by a lot. He didn't need to use the light element intermittently like before to increase his speed. Now, he could directly use it to support his flight. Of course, all of this was under the premise that he didn't use the light element at all. And with the support of the light element, Yun Nuoshing's speed could be said to be chasing the stars and chasing the moon. In just a short moment, Yun Nuoshing saw the huge flying ship in the sky. He flapped the 6 wings on his back and quickly retracted them. His figure streaked across the sky like lightning. In the next instant, he appeared on the ship and rushed into the residential area. On the deck, Xian Fu and the others were eagerly waiting. Ever since the light cocoon rushed out, they couldn't sense anything and didn't know how the tribulation was going. In the room, Ming, who was also anxiously waiting with his neck stretched out, was nestled in his bed. His large purple-black eyes looked uneasily at the door of the room. His heart was a little uneasy. "Shua! Big brother!" A black figure suddenly rushed in from the door of the room, scaring Ming Ming, who was already uneasy, to the point that he took 2 steps back. When he saw who it was, he immediately cried out in joy. He jumped off the bed and plunged into Yun Nuoshing's embrace, rubbing against him a few times like a spoiled child. Yun Nuoshing reached out and hugged the petite body in his embrace. He dotingly rubbed his head and laughed. Then, he carried Ming out and prepared to go to Xingyu City. He wanted to go out and take a look. Walking out of the room, Yun Nuoshing's figure flashed and appeared on the deck. He smiled at Xian Fu and the others. "Little brother Yun, you're back." Seeing the figure that suddenly appeared on the deck, Xian Fu and the others were stunned for a moment. Then, they suddenly burst out in joyful voices. They took a few steps forward and cupped their fists to congratulate him. "Big brother Xian Fu, my life was saved by you. Be more natural." Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly and waved his hand. He took a step to the side and didn't accept Xian Fu's greeting. "Little brother is too polite. We just gave you a hand in passing. We didn't help much." Hearing this, Xian Fu hurriedly shook his head. He looked at Yun Nuoshing with eyes full of reverence. Immortal rank, that kind of level, was perhaps the limit for them. They were already old and had no successors. They weren't like Yun Nuoshing, who was 16 or 17 years old and was already an immortal rank expert. Experts would be respected no matter where they were, especially in some cities where there weren't many experts. And Yun Nuoshing's 8 characters had already touched the ground. Smiling, Yun Nuoxing looked towards the horizon. There, a magnificent city appeared. A towering black tower stood in the middle of the city. It seemed to be the city's landmark, but he didn't know what it was used for. That's the Xian family's spirit refining tower. It was built based on the Red Star Academy's Earth Pagoda. The principle is similar, but it's not as detailed. When the soul enters it to train, the damage it receives is the same as the damage in the real world. However, the damage is much smaller. Seeing the surprise in his eyes, Xian Fu smiled and explained. There was a hint of pride in his words. To be able to replicate the Red Star Academy's training facility, this wasn't an ability that anyone could have. It's actually replicated. Hearing that, Yun Nuoxing looked at him in shock and said. He had stayed in the Red Star Academy before, and had entered the Earth Pagoda. That was the best place to experience life and death battles, and he remembered that he had been stuck at the 50th checkpoint for 10 days. The danger of that battle was still fresh in Yun Nuoxing's mind. After all, if it was in the real world, he would have died countless times. I'll take my leave first. Let's meet in the city later. Retracting his gaze from the distance, Yun Nuoxing said to Xian Fu. He couldn't wait any longer. After parting for half a month, he was worried that something would happen to Yuan. Although the latter had mastered a ceiling-level array, and with that kind of nature, there shouldn't be anyone who could make her suffer, he was still worried. After saying that, Yun Nuoxing ignored Xian Fu and the others. Carrying Ming, he turned into a black lightning and flew towards Xingyu City. Seeing this, Xian Fu couldn't help but smile bitterly. However, he didn't say anything to stop him. He only hurriedly transmitted a message. Mr. Yun, if it's possible, please help my Xian family. Chapter 196. His body turned into a ray of golden light, streaking across the sky, leaving behind a small tail that quickly dissipated. Like a golden meteor, he rushed towards the city in the distance. Xingyu City, it's quite big. Yun Nuoxing stopped at the edge of Xingyu City. He floated in the air, and carefully looked at the first city he came into contact with in the Divine Continent. His eyes were filled with surprise. Xingyu City was a few 100,000 miles in size, much smaller than Xingming City, but bigger than Divine Weapon City. Looking down from the sky, he could barely see everything. Crowds gathered like sardines on the streets, swaying back and forth. Waves of shouts, endless streams of horses and carriages, tens of thousands of buildings stood erect, and shops were everywhere. It was completely a miniature version of the world. Looking at the flow of people, it seemed to be an extremely prosperous city. The so-called Spirit Refining Tower was located in the north of Xingyu City. The tall black iron tower was somewhat strict. Under the slanted sunlight, half of its image was exposed, like a landmark of Xingyu City. The entire city was mainly made up of dozens of streets that ran horizontally to the end, arranged in a radial pattern. Other than the Xian family's Spirit Refining Tower in the north, Yun Nuoxing also saw different landmark buildings in 3 other directions, which seemed to belong to other forces. The most eye-catching one was the center of Xingyu City, where a group of blue buildings stood out compared to the surrounding yellow buildings. On the tallest ice-blue tower, 4 big words appeared. Galaxy College. Galaxy College? Yun Nuoxing was stunned. He had heard of this name before. When he was still living in the Red Star Academy, Xian Yin had shown him some information about other colleges, including Galaxy College. It was said that it was quite famous in the Divine Continent, but it was not as big as the Red Star Academy. Well, academies can be found everywhere. Yun Nuoxing shook his head vigorously after looking at the blue buildings for a while. There were specialists in the academy to guide one's cultivation, and any kind of cultivation techniques, herbs, arrays, or weapons were basically available. He had also been to the loft of the Red Star Academy, and knew how precious the things stored there were. Cultivating in the academy could be said to be twice the result with half the effort. However, he had never liked places like academies for cultivation. Perhaps it was due to his unruly nature, but he preferred to be unrestrained and free to soar in the sky, without any contact with others. This must be the autism that big sister Yun was talking about. Yun Nuoshing touched his face and couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. Yun had always said that he had autism and didn't like to see people. He quite agreed with it and also felt that he was a dark animal. Shaking his head, he threw all other thoughts to the back of his mind. After identifying the direction, he quickly swooped down towards the city and flew towards the distant place where he could vaguely see the shadow of a teleportation gate. The teleportation point was in the north of Star University and was a distance away from Star University. It was also a square, standing among the mountains, as if a mountain had been flattened to build this square. The scale was much smaller than the Bluestone Square in Star Underworld City. The size of the teleportation gate was also much smaller. The small one was only 100 feet high, and the big one was only a few hundred feet high. It seemed that they were all used for short-distance teleportation, as a rich spatial energy filled the space. After a rough glance, Yun Nuoshing withdrew his gaze. His gaze swept around, and among the many teleportation gates, he suddenly found a stone array that was also made of purple stones. Without thinking, he rushed down. Perhaps the teleportation passageway was almost closed down after the creation of the space teleportation gate. There was not even a guard here. The 8 purple stone pillars were covered in dust, and the underground array was covered in a thick layer of dust. When a strong wind blew, it would raise a cloud of dust. It looked like it had accumulated dust for countless years, and did not look like it had been used or opened. The 8 stone pillars even had some cracks that had accumulated over time. It was obvious that it had not been maintained for a long time. This was probably the reason why the door in the passageway could not be opened. Desolate and dilapidated, this was the only rhythm of this 10-foot stone array. Yun Nuoshing walked lightly on it, leaving footprints behind him. With every step he took, a large cloud of dust would splash up, dyeing his trousers and shoes an earthy yellow. Phew! It's really broken beyond recognition. I don't know how many years it has been since it was maintained, but that guy still said so confidently that it was quite stable. Evil Spirit looked at the underground array that was about to be destroyed. Yun Nuoshing could not help but scratch his head. Riding on this thing was purely a trap for him. I want to protect my rights. Deceive the consumers. Yun Nuoshing rolled his eyes and could not help but curse fiercely in his heart. If he returned to Xingming City in the future, he would definitely find that guy and have a good talk with him. It doesn't look like it has been used in a short period of time. Purple Knight sighed. He said that Yun and the others had already escaped from the teleportation gate. Since she said so, there should be no problem. However, Yun Nuoshing and the others had escaped one after the other. The speed of the teleportation gate was extremely fast, exceeding the speed of light by many times. When they left the gate one after the other, no one knew where the 2 of them were sent to. Time rewind. After thinking for a while, Yun Nuoshing took out the divine mirror of light and silently chanted. Boundless immortal energy spiraled around his body like a tornado, causing the stone array to tremble a few times. The whistling immortal energy spiraled in the air for a while, then rushed into the golden mirror in his hand. The exchange rate was in the center of the mirror. Soon after, an image was slowly projected in the space in front of him. Spatial energy, the evil spirit eye opened and a brilliant colorless light illuminated Yun Nuoshing's face. His eyes stared at the image. He wanted to see the flow of spatial energy. If he could see the flow of spatial energy, he might be able to follow this trace and find Yun and Zihun. Unfortunately, things did not go according to his wishes. Yun Nuoshing did not find any trace of energy. He had even rewound the time from 10 days ago to a month ago, but there were still no clues. The sky in the image was white then black, black then white, but he did not see any trace of silver blue. Big brother, point the mirror in another direction. Maybe you can find it. Just as Yun Nuoshing was anxiously staring, Ming tugged on his long hair and said softly. Yun Nuoshing stared blankly and felt that it made sense. The transmission channel was not stable. From the image on the screen, Xingyu City and Xingming City were not far apart. However, when the coordinates were inputted and magnified on the screen, it was a distance of millions of li. If they incorrectly inputted 1 unit more or 1 unit less, the final destination would be a little frightening. However, Yun Nuoshing had not studied this matter, and could only roll his eyes and search in the dark. According to Ming, Yun Nuoshing shifted the direction of the divine mirror of light to the other 4 directions. This time, he searched very carefully. He searched backward minute by minute, afraid that he would miss something. In the few directions, especially the north and east, he checked back and forth several times. The transmission channel that they came from Xingming City was connected to Xingyu City. The direction pointed from southwest to northeast. Xingyu City was not in the west. Xian Fu had told him before that it should be in the northwest position. When Yun Nuoshing first heard this news, he didn't think much of it. The west side of the divine continent, the entire western region, was called the Western Region. Because the search was very careful, it took a little more time. However, after 3 hours in the south direction in the sky, he saw a wisp of silver blue color that he had been dreaming of. It was like a Milky Way hanging in the sky, pointing straight to the silver transmission channel in the east. He was so excited that he wanted to jump up. The time was 21 days ago, which happened to be the time when they fell out of the spatial channel. However, why was the direction a little off? Yun Nuoshing didn't understand. In fact, he didn't know if the spatial channel he was looking for was the one they used. Although spatial channels were gradually being eliminated in the world, it didn't mean that no one used it anymore. He had used it once not long ago. Well, the time is right and the direction is not wrong. Logically speaking, it should be possible that this is it. Yes, yes. After calming down the excitement in his heart, Yun Nuoshing comforted himself. He carefully looked back and forth a few times at this time, but he couldn't find anything else. The scene reflected by the mirror slowly faded. In the end, the light completely disappeared. Then, it entered the divine light mirror in Yun Nuoshing's hand. Seeing this scene, Yun Nuoshing was a little happy and a little disappointed. He originally wanted to directly confirm whether Yu-Yin was in the spatial channel, but he couldn't see her. Suddenly thinking of something, Yun Nuoshing rolled up his sleeves and looked at the green bracelet on his left hand. It was given to him by Yu-Yin when they were still in Xingling City. It seemed to be an item used to ward off evil spirit. Later on, it did help a little in the ruins. The dark red was Yu-Yin's blood essence. It hadn't dissipated yet, and there was a faint fluctuation of her soul. It proved that she was still fine and nothing had happened to her. It's fine as long as you're still alive. I will go and find you. I will definitely find you and bring you back. Yun Nuoshing sighed. His palm touched the bracelet with some nostalgia as he murmured in a low voice. Now that he had confirmed that the spatial channel turned to the east, it shouldn't be difficult to find Yu-Yin and bring her back, right? However, the divine prefecture was so vast and boundless. Who knew where the east would lead to? The easternmost part of the continent was the east of the Kuan-Yuan region. Further east was the illusory space of the star field. It shouldn't be. I've already opened the spatial channel. There was only a difference of a few tenths of a second when we went out. We shouldn't have crossed the divine prefecture. After thinking for a while, he threw those unrealistic thoughts out of his mind. Although they had fallen into the void after breaking the spatial channel, they were still within the control of the spatial channel and would flow along with it. According to Ziyi, The two of them had escaped when they went out of the spatial channel. In that case, Yuin might have also come out. It was just that they were separated by a long distance because of the time difference. However, Sister Yuin also has a divine weapon and a sealing magic formation. She has learned the Flame Demon Burning Sky incantation. I don't think anyone can hurt her. I'll take a stroll around Xingyu City first. After thinking for a while, Yun Nuoxing nodded. He wasn't afraid that Yuin would be in any danger. Her means were no less than his. Moreover, the old god wouldn't have the time to care about a little practitioner at the mortal level. Who's there? Just as Yun Nuoxing was arranging the itinerary, a shout came from outside the stone array. Perhaps Yun Nuoxing had stayed here for too long and was noticed by someone. Or perhaps it was someone who was attracted by the fluctuation of energy. Although the fluctuation of energy caused by the spatial channel was concealed outside, the fluctuation of energy in this place wasn't small. The energy used to trace back time was relatively large. Yun Nuoxing was anxious and even mobilized the energy of heaven and earth. Perhaps it had been sensed. In short, someone was coming. The person who came was wearing a purple gold robe. He was about 30 or 40 years old. There was a flamboyant Xian character embroidered on his chest. Obviously, he was from the Xian family. At this moment, this person stood outside the transmission stone array and stared sharply at Yun Nuoxing, who was in the center of the stone array. Someone from the Xian family? That Xian family? If that's the case, could it be that the spatial channel to the Divine Lands is from Xingming City to Xingyu City? However, because Yun Nuoxing's back was facing him, the person who came couldn't see his face. He had nothing to be afraid of. If he went out, he would definitely be interrogated as if he was a spy. It would be an unnecessary trouble. Although the spatial channel had not been repaired for a long time and was no longer in use, no matter what, it was something that belonged to the Xian family. Trespassing didn't seem to be a good thing, really. Why are your eyes so good? Don't you know that it's better to look less? Hearing the shout, Yun Nuoxing curled his lips and muttered indifferently. The colorful pattern on his right hand glowed faintly. Then, a small enchantment quietly opened up and wrapped around Yun Nuoxing. Now, because Ling Hongjian was completely absorbed by him, he didn't have to take it out to open the enchantment that was unique to divine weapons. With a thought, he could open it. And Yun Nuoxing was like this, obviously. He didn't plan to go out and say anything. When the middle-aged man saw that Yun Nuoxing didn't move, he frowned and walked in. Just as he was about to open his mouth to ask, the person in front of him suddenly disappeared in the blink of an eye. Furthermore, he completely disappeared. Even his energy sense was cut off. If it wasn't for the footprints left on the ground, he would have thought that he had seen a ghost. Where did I go? However, the man still widened his eyes in shock. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. Then, he swallowed his saliva and immediately retracted his step. He turned around and walked away. He couldn't help but mutter, "I didn't see anything, I didn't see anything." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.